I was a 20-year-old game booster in Inchin, an orphan with a buzz cut and a borrowed surname, killing 10-hour shifts at the Tomato Grand Internet Cafe for clients who never showed. Then the sky grew a mouth and swallowed me whole, and the behemoth survival battlefield tagged me Survivor 777, tripping the title goddess of luck's indulgence. The orphan nobody waited for had been claimed by the goddess of luck herself, with an earth badger no one else could draw. Tap that like, hit subscribe, and stick around. Both keep these uploads alive. Behind every line you just heard is a moment that broke first. Let me show you that one. My name is Im-Ki, and on the morning the sky ate me, I was standing outside the Tomato Grand Internet Cafe in Inchin, 1 meter 73 in my shoes, scratching the back of my head and checking the time on my phone every 30 seconds. Because my coaching client was already running late. I had been a game booster for 5 years straight, 10 hours a day, which had turned me from a scrawny kid into a young man people called handsome whenever they didn't call me a girl by mistake, and the mistake was honest enough that I never argued with it. My voice had landed somewhere neutral, and my face had landed somewhere too pretty, and if I let my hair grow past my ears once, the comments lined up for a week, so I had kept a buzz cut ever since I was old enough to choose my own haircut. The name didn't help either, because Headmaster Grandma had picked me up at the Tomato Grand Orphanage on the 7th Night Festival and given me the character for 7 in my name, then upgraded it to the fancier 7 because she wasn't satisfied with the plain one. Her surname was Im, and Im Han Yoon was the prettiest name I knew, so when she passed in her sleep the year I turned 15, I kept her surname along with her habit of going back to the orphanage every afternoon to help with the kids. That coaching job was supposed to net me an easy day. Instead, I was muttering to myself about Inchin rush hour and how if my client didn't show before 10, the traffic alone could eat an hour and call itself lunch. I looked up at the bright sky and sighed about whether the kid had overslept. Then the sky went dark. I sucked in a breath so hard it hurt. A mouth, an absurdly enormous mouth, had spread across the entire sky. The kind of mouth that meant the body behind it didn't fit anywhere I could imagine. Before terror could find a handhold, the world went black and I stopped knowing anything. I came back groggy, lying in tall grass that towered over my head, under trees too big to belong to my world, and I didn't sit up right away. I lay still and counted the directions for any sign of movement, the way you check a lobby before pushing into a fight, and when nothing moved I let myself sit up to find that whoever had transported me here had also dressed me. My casual clothes were gone, swapped for a thick set of fur clothing that should have been suffocating in this heat, and yet I wasn't even warm. I patted my chest, found my own shirt still underneath the fur, and let out the breath I had been holding, deciding the swap was a bonus piece of gear rather than a wardrobe theft, and that I'd take it. Half an hour of cautious silence later, a voice the size of a thunderstorm announced that I was now a survivor on the Behemoth survival battlefield, the current battlefield being the Behemoth kindergarten, and that I should pay close attention. The voice listed the rules without waiting for me to keep up. Every survivor drew a base beast, the creature my survival depended on. Every survivor drew between 1 and 3 talents or skills, and the base beast itself rolled between 1 and 3 of its own. Killing behemoth cubs once the battlefield opened had a chance to drop a treasure chest, and for the first 3 days the cubs would not auto-aggro survivors, with the drop rate generously boosted to ease beginners in. A battlefield panel would track everything. I liked the structure. I had spent 5 years inside game tutorials. This one just had a louder narrator. The voice fired off 2 more lines before I could process the first batch. I had been assigned to Behemoth Survival Battlefield number 7, District 777, as Survivor number 777, and the 7777 combination had triggered a unique special title called Lucky Goddess's Favor. I blinked at the air. 7 was apparently the goddess of luck's lucky number, and I had stacked 7 of them by accident. Before I could roast my own fortune, a third line told me the battlefield would officially begin in 1 hour, and that I should pull up my panel and start drawing. The panel obeyed me on instinct. A faint window unfolded across my vision, sectioned into personal panel, base beast panel, inventory, and chat channel. I rubbed my chin and tapped the personal panel first. The display introduced me by name as Im-Ki, listed my strength as a single question mark, pinned my luck somewhere between 7 and 3 more unknowns, left the talent and skill rows blank, and stamped the title Lucky Goddess's Favor onto my forehead, under the unique tag. The evaluation line then took its time to mock me. It noted that even the weakest newborn behemoth was stronger than I was, and politely wondered how I had survived this long, before asking whether I happened to be the goddess of luck Zai. I let that one land. Even a newborn behemoth outstating an adult human meant the base beast really was everything the system claimed it was. No wonder it had been promoted at the top of the rules. I pulled up the title details next, and the first effect locked my luck to a floor of 7 no matter what happened, while the second granted me the blessing of the goddess of luck, 1 item blessed per day, and the third sat as a question mark waiting to unlock. Tacked to the bottom was a message from the goddess herself, crooning that she suddenly had a little zai of her own, and that her zai should work hard to climb up to where Mama was. I went quiet for a second and let the line settle, because apparently I had picked up a divine mother on the way through the giant mouth, and the goddess of luck no less, which was about as convenient a draw as a transmigrating survivor could possibly ask for. I closed the personal panel and opened the base beast panel, which was empty as expected since I hadn't drawn one yet. The inventory came next, and the first 3 slots already had something inside them. A base beast egg that would automatically use itself in 1 hour if I didn't crack it first. A random talent roulette good for 1 to 3 spins on the same 1 hour autofuse, and a random skill roulette running on that same timer. I muttered to myself that for a luck-based draw, the freshly minted zai of the goddess of luck should at least pull 2 of each, otherwise the title was getting wasted. Then I remembered the once-a-day blessing and stared down the base beast egg, since the egg was the foundation of everything and the most important role on the entire table. So I picked it and asked the panel to bless it. The panel asked back whether I really wanted to bless the base beast egg, and of course I did, but the panel then politely informed me that the blessing of the goddess of luck could not be used on living organisms, and that my title had quietly updated to reflect the new rule. I tapped through the update and found that a fresh line had been appended at the bottom by the goddess herself, explaining to her zai that her blessing could not be used on living things, because not every life form could withstand luck. Fine then. If my cheapskate goddess mom said so, I would be a good son, and obey. I jumped to the talent roulette instead, because talents had to be rarer than skills, and I dropped the blessing on it. The roulette in my inventory shed its plain skin for a soft golden glow that made it look high-end at a glance. I tapped it for the details. 3 guaranteed spins now, with the chance of pulling special talents bumped up. The blessing of the goddess of luck was earning its keep already. That was the warm-up done, and it was time to crack the egg open and see what kind of monster I had drawn for myself. I pulled the base beast egg out of inventory and used it. The thing materialized in front of me 3 meters tall, and I finally understood the bloodline math. If a behemoth cub hatched at that size, of course they outstatted humans on day 1. A grown one didn't even live in the same physics as me. The shell shook, then the cracks started lacing it like glass under a hammer, and a few seconds later the pieces fell away and my base beast stood there blinking at me with eyes the size of plates. And I trembled hard enough that there was no point pretending I didn't. I had never stood within reach of so much as a tiger outside a television screen, and now a creature the size of a delivery van had hatched out of an egg with my name on it, while the base beast lowered its head and started chewing on its own eggshell with the methodical contentment of an animal getting its first meal. I watched it work and realized I recognized the shape, the wide face, the heavy claws, the stripe down the back. I exclaimed under my breath that it looked like a giant version of a honey badger, then immediately scolded myself for wondering whether honey badgers were oviparous, because this wasn't my old world and the rules clearly weren't either. I opened the base beast panel for the first real read. The species name came up as Earth Badger Cub, with its strength sitting at being level and its bloodline listed as Giant Beast Bloodline, which the panel was kind enough to scale for me from Giant Wild Beast all the way up through Giant Demonic, Giant Mutated, Giant Desolate, Starry Sky, Universe, and Eternal Giant Beast. The talents row read Passive Specialization, Toxicity Adaptation and Disdain. The skills row read Flesh Skin Separation and Iron Head. And the foundation row simply said Grass Hut. The description painted the Earth Badger as one of the overlords of the Great Earth Plains, a giant mutated beast that lived either fighting or on the way to a fight. And the official roast told me that for an initial base beast egg, the highest bloodline tier on offer was Giant Beast, with a draw rate of 0.001%. So my goddess Mong had quietly given me a 1 in 100,000 bloodline as the opening gift. I muttered that the description seemed to undersell the kid, since Earth Badger was supposed to cap at giant mutated by race, and somehow mine had jumped 2 tiers above its species. I made a mental note to stop questioning gifts. I tapped the talents one by one, starting with Passive Specialization, which came up as Epic Unique and doubled the effect of every passive skill, but locked out active ones, with a level cap of 8 that promised to keep multiplying. Whether or not each level added another full multiplier, the floor effect was already insane, and the ceiling was potentially a 10-fold passive bonus. Toxicity Adaptation was perfect quality, granting immunity to toxins below the Transcendent rank, which basically meant I would shrug off anything short of late-game poisons. Disdain was a transcendent racial talent that bumped every attribute by 1% in combat with luck, noted as a hidden stat and excluded, and percentage bonuses had never once gone out of style as far as I was concerned. The skills were leaner but solid. Flesh Skin Separation, perfect quality and passive, kept the badger's skin and flesh in a slightly separated state, so incoming damage took a hit before it landed, with a noted weakness against attacks above perfect rank. Iron Head, rare quality and passive, slightly increased strength and constitution during combat. I tapped the back of my hand, an old thinking habit, and reminded myself that Passive Specialization doubled all of it. A slight increase, doubled, was still a slight increase, but a 100% improvement on a slight increase was no joke. I closed the readout, and on balance I was very happy with my badger and the way the goddess had stacked its sheet. The foundation row was the last unknown, so I clicked through. The panel offered me a grass hut, common quality 3x2 square meters of building area, no attached structures, no current effect, level 0. It told me that to enter or exit the foundation, I needed only to place a hand on the base beast and mentally command it, with the caveat that I could not do so mid-combat. The introduction asked, rhetorically, why we called the base beast a base beast, then explained that the foundation itself took no damage until the base beast died, with the disclaimer that some special abilities could still reach me inside. I turned and looked at the earth badger, who was still munching, and yes, perched between its shoulders was a tiny exquisite grass hut that looked like a dollhouse glued to a small truck. I walked over, set my palm against the badger's flank, and mentally commanded entry. My vision went dark, and the next second I was standing in front of the same grass hut, full size now, while the floor and the horizon were covered in long coarse hairs that I quickly realized were the earth badger's own fur, and the whole place felt like being shrunk and dropped into someone's toy room. The hut was simple. One door and one window, taking 2 of the 3x2 meters of floor, the leftover meter and a bit serving as a small courtyard. Inside felt strangely safe, walls made of grass or not. I stepped back out, leaned against the wall and opened my inventory. Time for the wheels. I picked the blessed talent wheel first, because 3 guaranteed spins with boosted special chances was a buffet I refused to skip. A giant golden wheel snapped into existence in front of me, ringed with at least 100 small squares of varying size, each square filled with 3 question marks. The number 3 at the center marked my remaining spins. I rubbed my hands and prepared to pray. Back when I had spun gacha for paying clients, I had prayed to every god and Buddha in the rotation, because pulling the desired weapon early meant the leftover budget went into my pocket. This time I had connections, since I was the Goddess of Luck Mama's brand new Zai Zai, so I prayed silently to Goddess of Luck Mama for a mythical grade special talent, with a respectful preference for the highest tier she had on the shelf. In an unknown space somewhere far above me, Goddess of Luck Mama slowly opened her golden eyes and stared blankly ahead at something only she could see. A small amused smile pulled at the corner of her mouth, and she shook her head gently, as if at a child who had asked for too much. Then she lifted one slender finger and tapped the air. A gold coin appeared, faintly glowing, hung there for a moment and vanished. A ripple ran across the empty space and dissolved, and the goddess closed her golden eyes again, slipping back into whatever sleep deities took. Back on the kindergarten side, my wheel was spinning so fast the squares blurred into a single ring of light. I stared at it with my heart climbing into my throat. The squares were different sizes and I had no idea whether bigger or smaller was better, but going by every scammy game I had ever boosted, small had to be rarer. After 10 long seconds the wheel slowed, and after another 3 the pointer settled on a square that wasn't the smallest on the board, but was one of only 3 of its size. A chime told me I had drawn the legendary grade unique talent, Harmony. The whole wheel flared gold so bright it blinded me. I rubbed my eyes and looked again, just to be sure. And yes, the readout still said legendary unique. I laughed out loud and yelled that a kid with a mama really was a treasure, and that Goddess of Luck Mama was the best. I tapped to spin again before the streak could cool. Spin 2 landed on a special perfect grade talent called Architect. Spin 3 landed on a special transcendent grade talent called Builder. Both special, both clearly base related, and the matched pair was way too neat to be random. I stared at the 2 new names for a while and let myself smile. The skill wheel was up next, plain and unblessed, looking shabby next to the still glowing talent wheel, and I gave it a moment of mourning for the lost blessing before tapping to spin. The first roll dropped me an excellent grade skill called Ejection, and the second roll dropped me a common grade special skill called Decomposition Art. Excellent quality was mid-shelf and perfectly fine for a starter, while common quality on a special skill was a little stingy, and the old rule of thumb said low quality usually meant weaker effects, so I quietly hoped Decomposition Art wouldn't end up too ridiculous when I tried to use it. I pulled up the readouts to confirm what the wheels had given me. Harmony came up as special talent, legendary unique, level 1 of a maximum 9, with the live first effect letting companions share and sum their basic attributes, while effects 2 through 4 sat locked and the companion counter ticked at 1 slot used out of 9. The introduction saying that I had it. The badger had it, everyone had it, and the comment at the bottom muttered something about 1 + 1 = n, that the math was going too far but that the lucky gold would make it work. I had no idea what lucky gold meant yet, but the rest of the line was already heaven-defying, exactly the kind of payoff a legendary unique special talent was supposed to deliver. Architect came in as special talent, perfect quality level 1 of a maximum 6, increasing every building's effect by 1% per level, with the introduction bragging that it used real high-quality materials. Builder followed as special talent, transcendent quality, level 1 of a maximum 7, reducing construction requirements by 1% per level, with a floor of 1, because apparently someone was shopping around for me. I rubbed my chin and let the 2 readouts settle next to each other, because they were obviously late-game talents and the math at max was insane. A 6% building boost paired with a 70% material cut, the kind of pairing that simply did not roll twice in a row by accident. Goddess of Luck Mama had quietly told me to play it safe and grow my territory, and I was inclined to listen to my new divine mom. The skills were faster reads after the talents. Ejection came up as active skill, excellent quality, level 1 of a maximum 5, slamming my feet into a powerful forward burst with a small movement speed buff after landing. Plus a warning that anyone below Huang level strength shouldn't spam it, and I nodded along because it would clearly carry both my escapes and my chases. Decomposition art came up as special active skill, common quality level 1 of 1, letting me decompose a behemoth corpse into corresponding materials with a 1% chance of pulling a special item, and the introduction noted it was most cost-effective on food I couldn't finish. The hint landed for me straight away, because a behemoth's body was massive enough that I would never finish eating one even with the badger helping, so converting the leftover meat into material was a clean second use, and while the quality stung, the function tracked exactly the way I needed it to. That was every readout cleared. With only a few minutes left before the battlefield opened, the last item on my list was harmony itself. I left the foundation and reappeared beside the earth badger, who had finished its eggshell breakfast and was yawning, and I went to pat its belly only to freeze partway through the motion. When the badger had first hatched, I could reach just below its back, and now the same swing of my hand stopped at its belly, so I stepped back several meters to check. And yes, the cub had stretched from about 3 meters at hatch to about 5 meters now, the rough size of a small truck. Nutrition catching up, apparently, eggshells included, and I twitched the corner of my mouth because if I hadn't pulled harmony, my early game life would have been one long hide-in-the-hut grind, while the badger lived its best life on top of me. I checked the base beast panel again to see what the size jump had done to the rest of its sheet. The badger's strength had jumped from Bing level to Huang level. The bloodline still read giant beast, the talents and skills still listed under their proper names, and the foundation still said grass hut. I told myself out loud that of course a creature this big had to scale its stats with it, and that the jump was on the aggressive side, because behemoths really did live in a different physics than the rest of us. I was envious for about 3 seconds before remembering that in a moment those numbers would be partly mine too. I walked over, set my hand on the earth badger, and used harmony. The system chimed in my head with a confirmation that the harmony had landed. I barely had time to feel triumphant before my whole body went hot, then stinging, then warm in a way that ran underneath the sting and canceled it out before I could scream. My veins bulged up under my skin. Sweat poured down my arms and back until I probably looked like a sinister rogue scaring children at the orphanage gate. After an unknown stretch of time, the burn lifted off me and my body felt suddenly light, as if the pain had been a dream. My arms told a different story, slick with sweat, but I wasn't paying attention to the sweat. I clenched my fists and moved through a slow stretch, lighter and more comfortable than my body had ever been in my life. I pulled up the personal panel to confirm. The panel introduced me as M Key, strength Bing level, luck still 7 through 3 unknowns, talents now listed as harmony, architect, and builder, skills now ejection and decomposition art, and at the bottom my title had quietly evolved into Goddess of Luck's Indulgence under the unique tag. I was still chuckling about how genuinely terrifying my new sheet was, when the earth badger snapped into a vigilant stance underneath me and let out a low roar, its head swinging left and right as it scanned the grass. I tried to look where it was looking, but the grass around me stood roughly twice my height, and the view ended at my eyebrows, so I jumped up onto the badger's back instead. Without harmony, I would not have made that jump in 1,000 lifetimes. From the badger's spine, I could finally see across the plain, and nothing moved, no shapes, no shadows, just the long green ripple of the grass, stretching off in every direction. I muttered to myself that maybe whatever the badger had smelled was buried in the grass somewhere I could not see, and right then a gentle breeze slid across the plain. The breeze hit me like a hurricane. I dropped flat, fisted the badger's fur with both hands, and held on while what would have been a soft kindergarten breath for any native here came within an inch of tossing me off my own base beast. It lasted maybe 10 seconds and then died, and I stood up and brushed myself off, and reminded myself that absolutely nothing about this world was scaled for a 1.73 meter human. The badger roared again, but this time its eyes were fixed east. The grass over that way was shaking in a long, sinuous line, and based on the shape of the shake, I guessed snake, except this was a world of giant beasts and a centipede or millipede would shake the grass the same way, so I kept my mouth shut and waited. The narrator chimed in to inform me the 1-hour adaptation window had ended, and the behemoth survival battlefield was officially open. I barely glanced at the line. The first 3 days the cubs would not auto-aggro, but auto-aggro and won't kill you on contact were not the same sentence, so I kept my eyes on the approaching shake. What pushed out of the grass was a centipede the length of 2 parked cars, its body sheathed in a green metallic plating, its legs running with barbed spikes, and its mouth a pair of mandibles full of teeth that looked happy to take pieces out of me. It was the kind of creature that would make anyone with a bug phobia hit the floor in a dead faint. Faint here and you became food, which was a clean enough warning to remember for the rest of my life. The earth badger, on the other hand, had a very different reaction. Its small black nose twitched once, and then twitched again, and a moment later, I heard a soft dripping sound from somewhere underneath me. I looked down at the badger's fur and realized I was hearing my own base beast drooling onto the grass at the sight of its second ever meal. The first had been an eggshell. Now it was a green metallic centipede that smelled, apparently, like instant noodles. I patted its flank and told it to go. The badger covered the distance in 3 seconds, slammed one paw down on the centipede's head, and pinned it to the dirt, then dropped a second paw across its body when the writhing tail tried to coil around its foreleg. Then it ripped the bug in half. Green blood sprayed across the grass and across the badger and across my boots as I hopped down off its back, and the earth badger casually picked up the head end and started chewing with the same serene focus it had given the eggshell. I had time to think that yes, my badger was an absolute monster, before the sky lit up with golden script announcing me to the entire battlefield. Survivor 77 was the first to kill a giant beast. The reward was the Encyclopedia of Giant Beasts, the title First Blood, and a first kill treasure chest. The announcement ran 3 times so nobody could miss it, which was perfect because the chat channel was still locked and I had nobody to brag to anyway. I stood there with my eyebrow climbing my forehead. I was actually first. Across an entire battlefield of survivors, my newborn cub had killed before anyone else's. I could hear myself laughing under my breath. Goddess of Luck Mama really was doing the work. A treasure chest had popped into existence beside what was left of the centipede, and I walked over while the badger crunched away on its breakfast. The smell of it actually made me hungry, and I realized I had been transported here around 10 in the morning and had spent an hour on the wheels, which meant it had to be past 11 by now back on Earth time, and lunch was overdue. The chest was named Exquisite Black Iron, a prefixed black iron treasure chest, third up the quality ladder. I opened the lid. 2 items glowed inside. The first was an excellent quality exquisite bread that promised a full day of satiety, with a description noting it had been carefully prepared for weak survivors. The line stung a little. I refused to argue with it because, compared to anything the size of my badger, weak was an honest read. The second was an excellent quality azure carapace bracer made from the shell of an azure carapace centipede. No active effect, just a small amount of defense. My very first piece of equipment, even if it was carved from the same species I had just torn in half. I picked it up, accepted the equip prompt, and watched the bracer dissolve into light that wrapped my arm shoulder to wrist. Weightless. Smooth. I rolled my shoulder a few times and could not feel a thing. Then I sat down in the grass and ate the bread. The exquisite bread had a rich milky smell, and somehow none of the greasiness. And I finished the whole loaf and rubbed my stomach and felt 80% full, which would do for an entire day. My appetite had clearly scaled with the harmony bond, because the old me would have been stuffed halfway through. I would not be hungry for a while, but the bread had gone down dry, and the moment the last bite cleared my throat, I noticed I was suddenly thirsty. Before I could complain about it, the sky lit up again. Survivor 197 million something had killed the second giant beast, earning the encyclopedia, the title one step behind, in a bronze treasure chest. I looked up at the golden announcement scrolling across the heavens and snorted, because the second place rewards were openly weaker than mine, and whoever caught their slot was about to be gnashing their teeth at me for the rest of their natural life. I closed the announcement and opened my own inventory to inspect the first kill rewards properly. The Giant Beast Encyclopedia came up as a perfect quality special skill that once learned became the Giant Beast Encyclopedia technique and let me read any unclaimed giant beast's attributes, habits, value, and danger level on contact. The description called the book no less important to a survivor than a base beast, and I had to agree. Knowing your enemy's sheep before you swung was the entire backbone of every game I had ever boosted, and it was about to be the backbone of staying alive here. The first blood title was rare quality and added 1% to my damage. The system noted I could only wear 1 title at a time, but the bonus stacked passively whether or not I had it equipped, which was a generous reading I would happily accept. The first kill treasure chest was where I held my breath. It was special quality, the format with the highest upper and lower limits on the entire ladder, capable of dropping anywhere from 1 to 9 items, and the description guaranteed at least 1 special item in every chest opened. I rubbed my palms together, closed my eyes, and asked Goddess of Luck Mama for a grand slam. The chest popped open in a wash of gold so bright my eyes watered, and when the light cleared 4 items lay inside. 4 was solidly middle of the road, and I let myself feel a flicker of disappointment for half a second before remembering the whole thing was free. Then I started reading. First was an inventory expansion card, perfect quality special item, 1 slot added to the inventory on use. I used it immediately and watched my inventory grid widen by 1 square. The description joked that you simply could not fit it all, and I was already starting to agree. Second was a pair of boulder treads. Excellent quality equipment, boots forged from ordinary ore over a thin leather inner sole. Average defense. Somewhat heavy. I stared at the stone shoes for a long second, and wondered which idiot blacksmith had decided a person should walk around in rocks, but I equipped them anyway because heavy was a forgivable sin when the alternative was nothing. Third was a black armor horn greatsword, rare quality weapon with the tag sharp and sturdy, forged from the spike of a black armored unicorn beetle. The sword was easily 2 meters long with a blade an inch thick and had to weigh well over 100 pounds. I picked it up and gave it a slow test swing through the empty air, and without the harmony bond I would not have lifted it off the dirt. With the bond it felt natural in my hands, and I stowed it in the new wider inventory with a grin. Fourth was the fireplace blueprint, rare quality consumable blueprint, a pattern for a stone and mud fireplace that could be built inside the foundation, requiring 1 stone of any quality, 4 mud of any quality, and 1 tinder. The fireplace would warm the room and increase fuel burn time by 3%, and the moment I read it, the first kill treasure chest dissolved into nothing. I scratched my chin and looked around for stones. There were basketball-sized rocks scattered across the grass, and I picked one up easily with one hand, smiled at how light it felt now, and dropped it toward my inventory. The rock vanished from my palm and a stone slot appeared in my grid, tagged as junk quality, the description politely informing me that it was an ordinary stone and completely useless. So junk quality stone did not even count as material for the blueprint, which was a slap, but I kept harvesting anyway. The smaller pebbles refused to go into the inventory at all, and after some testing I figured out only basketball-sized or larger rocks counted. I ended up with 27 junk stones, none of which could craft anything, all of which I could at least throw at somebody if it came to that. The sky lit a third time. Survivor 9,800,000-something had taken third place with another encyclopedia, the title 3 steps behind, and an iron treasure chest. The reminder was useful. I pulled out the Giant Beast Encyclopedia technique slot into my active skills. It was just an appraisal skill rebranded for Giant Beasts, which made me laugh, and out of curiosity I tried to read my own Earth Badger. The panel politely told me the encyclopedia could not view acclaimed giant beast's attributes, which meant every other survivor's base beast was a black box to me and mine was a black box to them. Good. Anyone could be hiding a heaven-defying talent under that lock, including me, and the symmetry was the only fair thing about it. I climbed back onto the Badger and looked around for a heading. The whole horizon was grass except for one feature, a massive tree miles off in the distance that towered over everything else. So I picked the tree and pointed the Badger toward it, because picking nothing was worse than picking wrong. The Earth Badger paced forward at a smooth, low gait, and for something the size of a small truck it made almost no sound. No ground shudder, no foot thuds, just the long, quiet slide of a predator who lived in this world for a reason. I scanned the grass constantly, hoping for another target so I could test the encyclopedia on something live. But a full half hour passed without a single beast in sight, and the tree had not visibly moved closer. Another half hour and the tree still sat where it had been, and I muttered the old saying about how a mountain that looks close will ride a horse to death before you reach it. The vegetation thinned though, and the grass shrank from chest high to ankle high, and my line of sight finally opened. I stood up on the Badger's spine to take advantage of it, and almost immediately I spotted something off. A pressed track ran through the dirt ahead, smooth and continuous like a long ribbon, easily 10 centimeters across. A snake path. I rubbed my chin and weighed the math. My base beast was a giant honey badger, and honey badgers ate snakes for fun, and this snake, whatever it was, had no business worrying us. I told the badger to follow the trail. The badger sniffed the path and its eyes lit up. Apparently this one smelled even better than the centipede. Its pace quickened. Its tongue actually showed for half a second. A few twists later, the path turned around a clump of low brush and we saw the owner. A giant snake coiled and resting, gray-scaled with a body diameter that matched the 10-centimeter track and a coil pile that suggested at least 10 meters of total length stretched out flat. I tapped the badger to halt and slip into cover, because surprise was always cheaper than a brawl, and then I aimed the Giant Beast Encyclopedia technique at the snake. The readout came up clean. Grayscale giant belly snake, cub, strength weak level, bloodline giant fierce beast, 1 talent named toxic secretion, 2 skills named constricting bind and rapid assault, danger level low. The description told me grayscale giant belly snakes lived near water. Adults could grow up to 100 meters with strength somewhere from Schwan to Dai. They had no special value as monsters, but their meat was delicious and giant beast merchants would always buy them. Weak level was a whole Bing level under my badger, and the badger was now sitting on Huang level. The talents and skills were excellent and rare respectively, both of them within easy reach. I told the badger to ambush. The earth badger trotted forward without a sound, dropped into a hunting crouch within striking range, and lunged like a starved tiger. The grayscale giant belly snake fired off constricting bind on pure instinct, whipping itself around the badger's body and squeezing. And the squeeze landed exactly nowhere because between flesh-skin separation and the doubled iron head and the sheer mass difference, the snake might as well have been giving my base beast a massage. The snake twisted and constricted and twisted again, and the badger did not budge an inch. The badger, not appreciating the disrespect, pressed one paw down on the snake's pinned head and then leaned its weight into the second paw, and the snake started thrashing for real, body whipping and slapping the dirt with enough force to thrash up a circle of dust. The badger took a couple of tail slaps to the flank without flinching, then dipped its head and bit the snake clean through the neck. Blood gushed, the body convulsed, and this time the badger learned its lesson and pressed the severed end down with a paw, so the spray did not hit its face. Smart cub. I was very nearly proud. The body kept twisting for a few more seconds out of pure muscle memory, then fell still. The badger dragged the carcass over and started gnawing on the long, meaty middle of the snake with the same focused contentment as before, because apparently the centipede had only been an appetizer and the snake was lunch proper. I shook my head, let it eat, and walked over to the head end, where a treasure chest had quietly dropped beside the flattened skull. The head was mashed into a disc, but I figured I could still try the decomposition art on it. So I did, and the skull glowed faintly and dissolved and left behind 2 palm-sized fangs that the panel logged as grayscale giant belly snake fangs. 2 of them, excellent quality material. Not bad at all for a head the badger had not bothered to chew. I pocketed the fangs and turned to the chest. The label read, Giant Wooden Treasure Chest. Wooden quality with a prefix bumping it slightly above the base. 2 items inside. The first was grayscale giant armor, rare quality equipment, scale armor made from the snake's hide, slight defense boost, and a description noting it offered a refreshing coolness in the heat. I had a weapon already, and now I had armor, which meant I could actually swing at things myself instead of using the badger as a one-cub army. My base stats matched the badger's through harmony, but my skin was still human skin, and going into combat without armor while sharing the same numbers was a bad trade. I equipped the armor on the spot, watched it flow over my torso, and the gray plate settled close-fitting under my fur coat with my casual shirt as the innermost layer. I knocked on the chest plate, then punched my own gut at about half strength, and felt absolutely nothing. Anything below Bing level was not getting through. The second item was giant bread, common quality. A meter-long loaf flagged as enough to feed a survivor for 3 days, or 5 or 6 if I rationed. With no food reserves at all, that was a clean catch, and I stuffed it into the inventory. The badger had eaten most of the snake by then, but its pace had slowed and it was clearly almost full. About a meter of the tail still lay in the dirt when it walked away from the carcass, and I stepped over and dropped decomposition art on the leftover length. The panel pinged me snake meat 1 piece, damaged snake meat 1 piece. The snake meat was common quality food ingredient, safe and hygienic, weight 100 grams. The damaged snake meat was the same grade with a disclaimer that hygiene was not guaranteed because a certain creature had partly eaten it first. I groaned out loud and complained that a full meter of snake body had only yielded 2 pounds of meat, that the middleman markup on this decomposition art was extortionate, and what the hell had happened to the skin and scales because over a meter of hide should have made a pair of shoes at minimum. The snake had been embezzled. Still grumbling, I packed the meat away, climbed back onto the badger, and pointed us at the giant tree again. Up on the badger's back, I caught myself yawning and rubbing my eyes, which startled me until I worked out it had to be around 2 in the afternoon by Earth time, and my old body was demanding its old nap. I checked the battlefield panel for a clock and found nothing. The chat channel might have shown 1, but the chat channel was still locked. I looked at the sun overhead instead, and the sun was not at center yet, meaning local noon had not landed, even though by my count I had been on this battlefield 5 or 6 hours already. I muttered to myself that maybe time here ran on a different scale than Blue Star, that the day might be considerably longer than 24 hours, and made a mental note to test it later. The walk dragged on. By the time the giant tree came into clear view, I had been moving on the badger's back for at least 2.5 hours and the sun still had not topped out. The tree was the kind of structure I had only seen in movies, the kind reserved for a world tree in a fantasy poster. And behind it was a whole forest of trees the same size. Whatever this place was, ordinary giants were the baseline. Another hour and the badger finally crossed under the canopy, and both of us breathed out at once. The shade dropped the temperature noticeably, which was a mercy because the noon heat had been climbing fast, and the bottle of water I did not have was starting to feel like a serious problem. I admitted out loud that I was hot as hell and thirsty enough to be miserable about it, and the badger swung its head around in a long alert sweep at the dead leaves on the ground. The forest floor was carpeted in fallen leaves, each one of them several meters long, and every step the badger took crackled across the carpet. Then the badger snarled at a perfectly empty patch of leaves ahead. I looked where it was looking and saw nothing, just a heap of dry brown leaves. But the earth badger did not lie about threats, and I trusted its nose more than my eyes. I stared until something resolved out of the camouflage, and then I almost choked. A 3-meter dead leaf mantis was crouched in plain sight, body and limbs colored to match the leaves underneath it, motionless until I had pinned it with my stare. It must have realized it had been seen, because it dropped its leaf shape and lifted into an alert stance, but it kept its body angled defensively, because my badger was several times its size, and it had clearly done the math. I fired the giant beast encyclopedia technique at it. Dead leaf mantis, juvenile strength weak level, bloodline giant beast, no talents, 2 skills named assault scythe and camouflage. Danger level low. The description called it the camouflage mantis, common in forests and grasslands, adults reaching anywhere from 5 to 70 meters with strength around Schwann level, no special value beyond that. No difficulty. I patted the badger and told it to take the kill. The earth badger charged before the mantis could decide whether to fight or flee, slammed it flat against the leaves, and the mantis's spindly limbs cracked under the badger's mass in 3 or 4 sharp pops. The abdomen twisted once, the body went limp, and a treasure chest dropped onto the leaves beside the corpse. I had actually drawn the black armor horn greatsword on the way over, hoping to test it on a live target, and I had been left holding it like an idiot at a wedding with no bride. I sheathed the sword, walked over to the chest, and read the label. Plain wooden treasure chest. No prefix, but 2 items inside. The first was an agility potion, excellent quality consumable, a slight permanent agility boost on drink, with a description warning that once agility passed a certain threshold, the potion would no longer work. Permanent stat juice for free was a yes any day of the week, and the bottle happened to be cold, so I drank it on the spot and let it double as a sip of water. It tasted faintly of apple cider, surprisingly clean. The second was a survival supply box, excellent quality consumable, on use yielding 1 liter of pure water, 50 grams of food, and 1 random excellent quality survival tool. I muttered that the giant beast battlefield was being so damn thoughtful with the weak survivors it bordered on patronizing, and opened the box anyway. The panel pinged me 500 milliliter pure water in 2 bottles, 1 kundaiji burger and 1 iron pickaxe. The water was bottled, which would solve my immediate thirst the moment I cracked a cap, and the burger came out actually still hot, which made me hiss in surprise because apparently the kindergarten really did not want a survivor to suffer through a cold sandwich on the first day. I stowed the burger immediately, because time froze inside the inventory and I wanted it warm whenever I finally ate it. The iron pickaxe was an excellent quality tool with a 1% chance to double the harvest while mining an ore vein, with a footnote that mining ores significantly above the pickaxe's grade would wear it out faster. Mining was clearly a whole side system in this world, and I had just pulled the entry-level kit for it without even looking for it. Goddess of Luck Mama was earning her keep on every chest now. I tucked the burger, the pickaxe, and 1 bottle of pure water into my inventory, then cracked the other bottle and took a few swallows before the earth badger trotted up with its tongue lolling out like a dog at a hose. I scratched the rough fur between its eyes and tipped what was left straight into its mouth, and even half a bottle for a base beast the size of a small truck had to feel like a thimble. The badger's expression went soft and content, and I decided against cracking the second bottle, because the second bottle was mine and we both knew it. The empty bottle promptly dissolved into nothing, which annoyed me on principle, since I had wanted to keep it as a refill canteen and the system had quietly stripped that option without warning. Cheapskate goddess mom, cheapskate inventory rules. I turned back to the dead leaf mantis corpse and squinted at it, because the badger had not even tried to take a bite, and a hungry base beast did not usually walk away from fresh meat. I asked the badger why it had not eaten, and the badger snorted at me and looked off into the leaves, which I took for a clear opinion that giant insect meat was beneath it. Fair enough. I dropped the decomposition art on the mantis instead, and the panel logged me 2 sickles and 2 pieces of insect meat, all common quality. The sickles were the mantis's forearms, over 1 meter long each and uncomfortably sharp, while the insect meat actually came out looking a little like lobster, pale and clean, and I wondered briefly whether it tasted like one too before tucking everything away in my inventory. I started to yawn before I even straightened up. The earth badger yawned right after me, a wide pink chasm full of teeth, and I had a quiet laugh at the two of us, the supposed apex predator of the Great Earth Plains and the half-pretty buzz-cut survivor on its back, both ready to nap through the worst of the sun. The forest floor outside the shade was rippling visibly in the heat, that watery shimmer you get off summer asphalt, and I muttered that the air had to be sitting somewhere around 50 degrees Celsius, the sort of temperature that should have flattened me on contact. It had not. I was warm but not punished, the kind of warm you got walking around indoors with the heat slightly too high. The reason was hanging on my body. I pulled up the inventory tag for the fur clothes the system had dressed me in at the start, and read the line for the first time. The label called it Novice Fur Clothes, Special Equipment, Perfect Quality, with the effect of holding my body temperature inside a comfortable band between roughly 15 and 35 degrees Celsius, and a description noting it was beginner equipment for weak survivors, to be reclaimed once the novice period ended. So my divine cheapskate mom had clothed me at a perfect quality grade for free, with a politely worded eviction notice attached. I shrugged at the air and accepted the gift while it lasted, because perfect quality climate control for a beginner who could not stand outside the shade was not the kind of present I was going to argue with. Nap time. I patted the earth badger and told it to lie down, and the badger curled itself into a shaded patch with the languid satisfaction of an old house cat finding the right tile, and within a minute its breathing had dropped into a low, steady snore. I could not just sleep on the ground beside a creature the size of a truck, so I set my palm against its flank and walked into the foundation, where the grass hut and its little courtyard waited the same as I had left them. I laid down on the floor of the hut, closed my eyes, and let myself sink. The walls were grass, and the floor was base beast fur, and the entire structure was perched between the badger's shoulders. But inside, with the badger alive, the place felt safer than any apartment I had ever rented. My mother on the other side of the sky was a goddess of luck. My new home was a hut on a badger's back. My old life had been 10-hour gotcha boosts, an Inchin rush hour and headmaster grandma's afternoons at the orphanage, and the realization landed quietly without any of the heat I would have expected, because half asleep I could still notice that everything ordinary about Blue Star had become the peace people back home dreamed about. I let the bitter little smile come and go without working it over, and I went under. I came back to a sound that punched right through the wood of the hut and into my eardrums. It was a long ringing screech, ratcheting and metallic, the kind of noise that bypassed thought and went straight to teeth. I stumbled up, rubbed a stiff neck, and walked out of the foundation back onto the earth badger's shoulders. The afternoon sun was still high. The screech came again, doubled and tripled, layered with siblings echoing from neighboring trees, and the moment I looked up I found my noisemaker. On the trunk of the giant tree, about a dozen meters above me, a cicada the size of a small car was clinging to the bark and chirping with its whole body. I muttered that cicadas had no business growing to 4 meters and pointed the giant beast encyclopedia technique at it. The readout came back as blazing monkey cicada, larva strength weak level, bloodline giant beast, 1 talent named molting, 2 skills named chirp and urine ejection. Danger level, extremely low. The description added that blazing monkey cicadas only emerged in the hottest summer weeks, that adult blazing monkey cicadas grew anywhere from 3 to 50 meters with most settling at shoe-on level, and that the larvae molted once every 10 days. The molted shells were valuable as medicinal ingredients in alchemy, and merchants paid high prices for intact ones. I raised an eyebrow and grinned at the trunk. So the screaming overhead was a free pharmacy. I patted the badger and pointed it on a slow circuit around the giant tree, scanning the bark for husks, and inside half a minute I spotted one, a translucent hollow shape clinging to the wood about 20 or 30 meters up. The bark was deeply grooved and would have been easy enough to climb, but the climb was boring, and the ejection skill had been sitting in my unused active slot since yesterday, begging for a field test. I jumped down off the earth badger, planted my feet, picked my line, and triggered ejection. A pressure detonated under both heels at once, and the world dropped out from under me. In less than 3 seconds, I shot up over 20 meters along the trunk and slammed into the bark face first, and my hands found grooves on pure reflex while the rest of me decided whether to scream. I clung there with the bark scraping under my palms, my chest stinging, the side of my forehead ringing, and looked down once and immediately wished I had not, because the badger looked very small from up there, and the ground looked very far. I groaned that the skill worked beautifully, and that I should have aimed a meter to the side of the trunk instead of straight into it, and made a note to remember next time that ejection ended in a target arrival, not a stop. I climbed the last few meters to the shell. The thing was over 3 meters long, but hollow and weightless, and a gentle lift detached it cleanly from the bark. The panel logged it as blazing monkey cicada molt. Material, common quality. An intact larval shell good as a common to excellent alchemy ingredient. I moved across the trunk to the next husk and pried it free, then to the next, and 10 minutes later I had stripped every accessible shell off the tree, 14 of them, packed neat into my inventory while the screaming overhead kept on going. My inventory reads 17 out of 20 slots used, and 20 had felt generous in the first hour and was already looking stingy. I looked up. The blazing monkey cicada itself was a dozen meters above me on the trunk, screaming its lungs out, and the noise was bad enough at close range that without harmony I was sure my eardrums would have started bleeding. The bug ignored me entirely. To a creature that grew up to 50 meters as an adult, a 1.73 meter survivor inching up its tree was a flea. Beneath notice, the kind of thing that did not even register on the threat board. That overconfidence was about to cost it. I crept up to within a meter, found my angle, and lunged at the cicada's back. My arms wrapped around its head and shoulders, and pinned it flat to the bark, and the bug went berserk under me, wings buzzing in a frantic blur that did nothing because my whole weight was on it. The wings flapping pried its own grip off the trunk before mine did, and the next thing I knew the cicada and I were peeling away from the bark together. We fell. The cicada twisted underneath me and let off a panic spray of urine from somewhere behind, and below us the earth badger had positioned itself with its mouth open like a baseball outfielder, until the spray hit, after which the badger reversed course in an undignified scramble I would tease it about for weeks. We hit the leaf carpet hard. The cicada took the impact, which was the only reason my ribs were still where they belonged. Several of its legs cracked under the landing, and the chirp dropped to a thin whistle, and I rolled off, coughed once, and pressed a hand to my sternum until the air came back. With my old human constitution, that fall would have broken my spine. With harmony and a Bing-level body, the worst of it was a tight ache and a sting where the bark had scraped me. I drew the black armor horn greatsword from my inventory, planted my boot on the cicada's thorax to pin it, and drove the blade down through its head. The greatsword went through chitin and bone like a cleaver through a melon, and buried itself half a meter into the dirt underneath, and the cicada's wings fluttered out one more time and then stopped. I yanked the blade free, stowed it, dropped decomposition art on the carcass, and got back 2 blazing monkey cicada wings, common quality material, with a note that they had no special use on their own but could be crafted into a simple paraglider with the right blueprint. No treasure chest dropped, which was a small disappointment, until I remembered that the husks alone had filled 14 slots. The earth badger trotted over and nudged me in the chest with its nose, sniffing me up and down like a worried parent, and I rubbed its head and told it I was fine. I checked the sky, and the sun had barely moved. So either I had slept for 10 minutes flat, or this world's day did not run on 24 hours, and the bet was on the long day, because between the wheels in the morning and the centipede kill and the snake kill and the mantis and the cicada, I had to have eaten at least 6 or 7 blue star hours. I muttered to no one in particular that the kindergarten's clock was clearly stretched, that I would test it properly later, and left the question hanging. I sat against the badger's flank and ran a quick inventory review, counting it down in my head, the azure carapace bracer and grayscale giant armor and boulder treads all equipped. Then the black armor horn greatsword, the fireplace blueprint, 27 junk stones, 2 snake fangs, the giant bread, the 2 pieces of snake meat, the half bottle of pure water, the kundeji burger, the iron pickaxe, the 2 sickles, the 2 insect meat, 14 cicada molts, 2 cicada wings, 17 out of 20 slots. I grumbled at the math and wondered whether expansion cards dropped from anything besides first kill chests, because at this clip I would run out of room before sundown. I leaned back against the badger and let my eyes close again. The novice fur clothes kept me cool, but the earth badger had no such gift, and the badger was puffing heavily even in the shade, so hunting through the worst heat was a losing trade either way. Better to nap until the sun tilted down and the air dropped a few notches. The cicadas overhead had quieted into a single sleepy rhythm. The breeze rolled through the canopy with a long, dry rustle, and somewhere between one breath and the next I went under again. I dreamed of a forest I had not earned yet, the kind where my badger and I belonged to the place rather than visited it. Beneath my dream the badger snored on. The 2 soundtracks twined together into a single quiet lullaby that I let myself stay inside as long as it lasted. A different angle of light woke me up. The sun had crawled west, the air had cooled into something I could actually move in, and the forest had switched soundtracks from cicadas to insects. I sat up and stretched, and the world came in sharper than it had been before the nap, as if my eyes had been wiped clean. The earth badger was up too, looking at me with patient round eyes that asked, plainly, what next? Time to find water. I climbed onto the badger's back and pointed us at the edge of the giant forest, because diving any deeper into a forest this size without a landmark was a fast way to get lost, while skirting the perimeter would eventually run me into a river or a lake. A forest this lush needed a water source somewhere close by, and a water source meant behemoth cubs coming to drink, which meant kills coming to me instead of the other way around. The badger paced through the leaf carpet with that long, quiet stride, and the rustle under its paws was the loudest thing in the woods for a while. The cicadas had given up for the day. The insect chorus rose by degrees as the light tilted toward evening, and I found myself remarking out loud that the place really did come alive after sundown. A wet rushing sound rose somewhere off through the trees. The earth badger heard it before I named it and angled toward it on its own, and within minutes the trees opened onto a river so wide my first thought was that I was looking at a lake. Several hundred meters across, at least. To an adult behemoth it would have been a ditch you crossed in 2 strides. To me it was the Han River dropped into a fantasy painting. The current was slow, the surface caught the late light in long copper ripples, and the bank was tracked all over with footprints of cubs that had come to drink. The badger went straight for the water and started lapping. I crouched beside the prince and rubbed my chin, because a watering hole this busy was a permanent food source as long as I camped the right side of it. Better than wandering. The plan grew on me as I worked it out, and I muttered approvingly to myself that this was exactly the kind of spot a smart survivor set up shop near. That the next step was a temporary shelter for the badger somewhere along the bank. Not for me. The foundation handled me. Water broke behind the badger before I finished the thought. A giant crocodile head came up out of the river in a hard rising arc, jaws open, aimed at the back of the earth badger's skull. I shouted a warning the badger did not need, because the badger had already pivoted with that liquid efficiency it kept hiding under the lazy expression, and instead of getting bitten, the badger bit the crocodile clean across its upper jaw and ripped the whole front of it out of the water and flung it overhead in a tumbling arc. The body slammed down onto the gravel 10 meters behind the badger, and lay there stunned, all its leverage and weight suddenly working against it on land. The badger did not wait. It pounced onto the crocodile's back, planted its hind feet on the spine, and started hammering down with both forepaws in a frenzied drumming barrage that flattened the head with every strike. The crocodile wailed and thrashed, and accomplished nothing because the predator that ate snakes for fun had decided that ambushing it was a personal insult, and that the lesson would be delivered in full. I almost felt bad for the bug. Almost. I aimed the giant beast encyclopedia technique at the crocodile while it was still being beaten. The readout came up as turtle belly giant crocodile, strength Bing level peak, bloodline giant fierce beast, 2 talents named aquatic great strength and turtle crocodile bloodline, 3 skills named frenzied strangulation, thick-skinned and water softness enhancement, danger level high. The description noted that turtle-bellied giant crocodiles lived in rivers, lakes, and swamps, that adults grew anywhere from 1 to 150 meters with their power generally at D level, and a handful reaching Die peak, that they carried a trace of giant mutated beast turtle crocodile bloodline, and that leather merchants paid premium prices for their hides. The notation also explained that peak rank meant a beast capable of breaking up to the next tier at any moment, which was why only peak got flagged on the readout. Danger level high for me. Danger level laughably low for the badger on dry land. In the water, the math would have inverted, but the badger had hauled the fight onto its turf inside 2 seconds. The wailing under its paws dropped to a thin rasp, and a few drumming beats later the crocodile's jaws fell open, and the body sagged still. A treasure chest dropped beside the carcass. The badger climbed off its kill, shook the river water off its fur, and shot me a smug look that I read clearly as a complaint about idiots who picked ambush as a strategy. I rubbed its head, told it to good boy itself, and walked over to the crocodile. The head was flattened paper thin, but the hide along the body looked undamaged, and an intact hide was the whole game. I asked the badger if it wanted any of it, and the badger shook its head and looked off, full and disinterested. So I dropped decomposition art on the corpse and waited. The panel logged me complete turtle belly giant crocodile hide, 1 piece turtle belly giant crocodile meat 1 piece, and premium turtle belly giant crocodile tail meat 1 piece. The hide came up as rare quality material, intact, prime stock for leather armor, the kind of inventory line a merchant would smile at. The meat was common quality food ingredient, ordinary table fare. The tail meat was the prize. Rare quality ingredient, slight permanent constitution increase for the eater, with a description noting it also accelerated growth in behemoths, and was sought after by every merchant on the channel. A wet drip caught my attention. The earth badger had its nose pointed at the 3-meter slab of tail meat in my hand, and a small pool of drool was gathering at its feet. I grinned at the cub and said, "Sure, you weren't hungry a minute ago." But suddenly the tail meat smells like a treasure, doesn't it? The badger made a small impatient sound. I tossed the slab to it. The badger caught the thing midair, dropped flat on the gravel, and went to town on it with the focused contentment of an animal that had been waiting all afternoon for exactly this meal. I turned to the chest. The label called it exquisite black iron, the same prefixed black iron tier I had pulled off the centipede earlier, third up the quality ladder. I rubbed my palms together and asked Goddess of Luck Mama for a grand slam, since the crocodile had been a Bing Peak elite by any sane reading, and the chest had no business handing me anything cheap. The lid opened on 3 glowing items. First was an eye protection visor, excellent quality special tool, providing clearer vision underwater, fashioned mostly from the crocodile's own eyes. The description allowed that it was not particularly useful for behemoths, but very useful for humans, which described my situation exactly, since I could not open my eyes underwater on a good day, and the river was not going to be a clean one. I stowed it. Second was a serrated axe, uncommon quality weapon and tool, forged from the teeth of the turtle-bellied giant crocodile, with effects boosting woodcutting efficiency and inflicting wounds that bled freely. The thing was nearly 1.5 meters long, all jagged teeth set into a curved haft, and looked exactly as intimidating as it sounded. I gave it a slow test heft and nodded my approval, because a felling axe that doubled as a butcher's weapon was the most directly useful tool I had pulled all day. Third was a honeycomb charcoal blueprint, rare quality blueprint, learnable at a manufacturing station to produce honeycomb charcoal, with a side note that the manufacturing station was automatically issued when the Foundation upgraded to level 1, so the system was now leaking information about Foundation upgrades, which was a free preview I would gladly accept. 3 solid items out of 3. Goddess of Luck Mama really had been listening for a change. 2 announcements punched across the sky on top of each other. The first told me that more than 5% of all survivors had now killed a behemoth cub, that the chat channel would open in 1 hour, and that this was a celebration milestone. The second told me that the survivors had hit the chat opening threshold inside a single day, and rewarded every survivor on the battlefield with 1 black iron treasure chest. The pair repeated 3 times so nobody could pretend they had missed it. A black iron treasure chest popped into my inventory next to everything else. I clicked my tongue at the math, because billions of survivors getting a black iron chest each was a generosity that bordered on absurd, but I was not about to argue with a free chest. The label read plain black iron, no prefix, so I cracked it on the spot. 2 items inside. The first was Heavy Strike, excellent quality passive skill, level 1 of a maximum 2, granting a 1.5 times damage on the target. The description called it a very ordinary skill with nothing much to say, which was an unusually humble note from the system. But a passive on a base beast with passive specialization was never ordinary, because that talent doubled the effect, which turned the line into a 2% chance for a triple damage hit. I slapped the skill book against the Earth Badger's flank, and the panel asked me whether I wanted to teach the skill, noting a 92% compatibility rating between Badger and book. I confirmed without thinking, because a passive that the talent doubled was a passive worth taking, and I made a small mental note that the system tracked compatibility between species and skills, presumably so a fire attribute beast did not get stuck learning ice attribute moves. The second item was a low-grade water attribute crystal, rare quality material, glowing a soft river blue with the effect of purifying water on use, and a note that it could also be consumed by water attribute behemoths to feed their elemental energy. The description called water attribute crystals products of crystal ore veins with wide applications. I rolled it between my fingers and grinned, because the thing read exactly like the spirit stones every cultivation novel I had ever booted clients through had been selling for 300 chapters. I pocketed the crystal, climbed back onto the Earth Badger, and pointed us at the tree closest to the riverbank. Plan was to settle here for the next stretch. Water source 10 seconds away at badger speed, a steady traffic of behemoth cubs coming to drink, and a giant tree thick enough to hollow into a shelter without leaving us exposed. I patted the trunk, hard as stone under my hand. The badger looked at me with a confused tilt of its head, and I told it I was planning to dig a tree hole, that the hole was for it, and that, by the way, had it grown again? The badger seemed to inflate proudly at that question. After eating the crocodile tail meat, it was a full meter taller than this morning. Growth like that in 2 hours bordering on absurd. But behemoth cubs grew on different rules than mammals back home, and I was learning to stop being surprised. The size jump meant the tree hole had to scale with it, 20 meters of depth at minimum, and a height that gave the badger room to stand. Luckily, the giant trees here had trunks over 10 meters across, so the geometry actually worked. I pulled out the new serrated axe and took a first swing at the bark. The blade slid in like it was carving cold butter. I blinked at the cut, took another swing, then another, and the wood gave up without complaint. Inside 2 minutes, I had outlined a doorway about 3 meters wide and 10 high, the rough mouth of the shelter, and now came the actual hollowing. The earth badger walked up, watched me work for a few seconds, and then casually swiped a forepaw at the trunk. A whole hubcap of wood blasted out of the wall in one strike. I smacked my forehead and laughed at myself because the badger's claws on a non-special tree was the entire job done 100 times faster than my axe, and I had been planning to chip away by hand like some kind of medieval idiot. I waved the badger forward and let it dig, while I followed behind, smoothing the edges with the serrated axe, since claws that size were the wrong tool for finish work. In less than 4 minutes, the badger had carved out a cavern. I finished trimming a minute later. The final shelter measured roughly 40 meters deep, 30 wide, and a hair over 10 high. The height pegged to give the badger standing clearance. The rest of the geometry oversized because we had the space. The walls were rough and stripy, more wood cave than carpentry, and I loved it. I clapped the badger on the shoulder and told it that we were staying here a while, and the badger gave me its low, pleased roar. The floor was uneven and splintered though, and a base beast deserved better than slivers in its paws. I called the badger out and we walked the leaf carpet outside, where I scooped armfuls of the giant leaves into a heap and loaded the heap onto the badger's broad back, planning to take the whole bundle down to the river to wash, dry the leaves in the evening air, then spread them across the floor of the hole as a mat. The sky lit up a third time as we reached the bank. The announcement told me the chat channel was officially open, 3 times, like the system never trusted us to hear anything the first time. I glanced up at the scrolling line and then kept washing leaves, because the river current did most of the work for me, and I was not in a rush to plug into a billion-strong global chat with my hands full of foliage. I was alone out here, no team to coordinate with, no one waiting on me, and the chat channel could wait until the leaves were spread and the badger was tucked into its new home. The pile rinsed clean fast, and I scooped the wet leaves back onto the earth badger's flank and walked us at a slow, leisurely pace toward the tree hole. The earth badger trotted back to the tree hollow with the wet leaves piled across its shoulders, and I started flinging them off in armfuls the second we ducked under the canopy. I spread each one flat on the grass to dry overnight, 4 meters long and a meter wide apiece, every one of them sorted earlier for size, and the stack was thick enough to lay a double layer across the whole floor of the cavern tomorrow. The sky was already smudging toward dusk by the time the last leaf was down, half an hour of light left at most, and I called the badger back inside and leaned against its flank to finally open the chat channel. The panel split into a Sector 7 global channel marked locked and a District 77 channel marked open, and I tapped the open one. A river of messages started scrolling past, but I held my eyes on the description first and read the manual through. Each survivor got 3 messages a minute on a 1-minute cooldown, and 3 trades a day with no carryover into tomorrow. Private friends had no message limit. Posts could be liked and pinned with behemoth coins, whatever those were. And first time logging in, you picked a handle within an hour or the system stamped your real name on for you. I tapped into my profile, found my avatar and real name already stamped on, and skipped the avatar because the system would not let me edit it yet. For the handle I typed Soki, the name Headmaster Grandma had used for me growing up, and locked it in. She had also called me Kia, but I had hated that one since I was 11, and made her stop. So Soki it was. The district population read 10,000 of 100,000, which meant each district capped at 100,000 survivors, and the room I had just walked into was barely a tenth filled. I let the scroll run. The chat was a glorious mess. Someone shouting about how dark it had gotten. Someone else complaining their base beast was a chicken. A guy moaning he had been transmigrated mid-game in his boxers, and only the novice sweater had saved him from public indecency. A woman asking whether the giant mouth that ate Blue Star had been someone's base beast, and another woman estimating that anything that big had to be at least Starry Sky level. The whole feed lit up next with people listing their base beast bloodlines, and the spread settled fast. Most of the channel sat at Giant Wild Beast or Giant Ferocious Beast. A small handful claimed Giant Demonic Beast, and nobody at all came in above Giant Demonic. The room collectively decided Giant Demonic was the ceiling, and started calling those few players the big shots of the district. I kept my mouth shut. My Earth Badger sat 2 tiers above their ceiling at Giant Beast Bloodline, the kind of pull the goddess had openly bragged was 1 in 100,000, and announcing that out loud was the fastest way to paint a target on my forehead. I went on watching, because 100,000 survivors at 3 messages a minute meant up to 300,000 messages an hour, more than enough to bury anything inconvenient. A wave of cold rolled through the hollow and made me flinch, and I rubbed my arms and checked the time and temperature in the panel header. 9 at night, 19 degrees Celsius, and the afternoon had run close to 50. The drop from nearly 50 to under 20 in one sundown was desert weather, and the chat caught up to it the same second I did. People begged for fire, the ones who had spent an hour drilling sticks for a spark and ended up with blistered palms and nothing to show for it. A guy bragged he had pressed himself into his base beast's fur and was warmer than he had been all year, and someone else asked how he had inserted that little smiley face, which sent the emoji button in the lower corner into circulation across the whole channel. People in the north of the map said the Nova's fur coat plus a heavy coat was carrying them through fine, and the snake-shaped based beast survivors complained there was no fur to climb into, and that they were freezing miserably. Trade offers followed close behind, an excellent grade machete swapped for food of the same grade, then a wave of asks for water and food, 10 or 15 at once, the desperate kind that meant their first day had gone badly. Most of them had not killed a single cub, and most of them had a strength readout of question mark and a base beast readout of weak. I scrolled past it all and sighed at the overflow of food in my own inventory, which was the kind of inventory only a goddess of luck could deliver to a survivor on day one. The river ran 100 meters from my hollow, the badger was a Huang-level oven I could lean against, and the novice fur clothes the system had handed me read at perfect quality, which I had not bothered to inspect until now, with a label noting they kept my body temperature inside a comfortable band and would be reclaimed at the end of the novice period. Of course they would. Cheapskate goddess mom, cheapskate inventory rules. A thought caught me. I cracked the second bottle of pure water out of inventory, set it on the cold floor at the mouth of the hollow to chill, and went back to scrolling. Inventory froze any state I sealed in, so a few hours outside in 19 degrees would give me genuinely cold water tomorrow when the afternoon hit 50 again. 2 hours went by like that. I saw survivors describing behemoth cubs I had not met yet, and base beasts I had not seen, and through the chat I started building a rough picture of what the kindergarten actually held. The yawns came on slow, and then all at once I tucked the chilled water bottle back into inventory mid-yawn, lay against the earth badger's flank, closed my eyes, and was gone inside 10 seconds. I woke into total darkness, lay there for a while staring at nothing, weirdly rested, before I remembered I was inside a tree on a different world, and worked out that no, I had not gone blind. I pulled up the chat channel for the clock, and the readout said 34:30 at night. I rubbed my eyes and looked again at the same 34, while the sky outside the hollow stayed pitch black. By Blue Star reckoning, I should have crashed around 10 in the evening, and even 10 hours of sleep would put me at 8 in the morning. But here it was somewhere past 34 and the sun was nowhere near up. The world had a different day length. Goddess of Luck Mama's kindergarten ran on its own clock, and I had no idea how much longer I had to wait for dawn. The chat told me the same story. People complaining their biological clocks said morning, but the sky said midnight, people announcing the clock read 34. And the new day was clearly not on Blue Star hours. 2 survivors had been jumped by cubs in the dark and counter-killed them with their base beasts, and walked away with minor injuries, including one ambushed by a leopard-shaped cub whose base beast's defense had simply refused to crack. Trade requests rolled in for water and food and stone, and one miserable post described a guy who had been clawed by his own base beast and barely made it into his foundation before he passed out. I glanced sideways at my own earth badger snoring against my back and decided it was on its best behavior so far. I scrolled the chat until the sky started leaking gray, and the panel clock ticked over to 35:59 just as full daylight hit the hollow. I stroked my chin and worked it out, that a day here ran 36 hours, 12 hours longer than Blue Star, and the temperature already read 25 with the climb visibly steepening. I rolled off the badger, walked out of the hollow into the morning light, and stretched until every joint in my spine popped. A whole night curled against fur had left every muscle in me complaining, and a quick set of jumping jacks and toe touches loosened the worst of it. Time for breakfast, and I pulled up my inventory and scanned the slots. Boulder treads, black armor horn greatsword, serrated axe, 27 junk stones, 2 grayscale giant belly snake fangs, the giant bread, 14 blazing monkey cicada molts, 2 blazing monkey cicada wings, the kunjeji burger, the iron pickaxe, 2 sickles, 1 snake meat, 1 damaged snake meat, the half bottle of pure water, 2 insect meats, the complete turtle belly giant crocodile hide, 10 pieces of turtle belly giant crocodile meat, the low-grade water attribute crystal, and the eye protection visor. 19 of 20 slots filled, with the fireplace blueprint and the honeycomb charcoal blueprint stashed in the grass hut overnight to free up the grid, and the bracer and the grayscale armor equipped without taking a slot. I had bread, burger, snake meat, insect meat, crocodile meat. The only thing missing was vegetables, and the burger had some lettuce in it, so the burger was getting saved for last. The earth badger rolled over with a low roar and shook itself awake. I rubbed its broad head and told it we were headed to the river to wash, then breakfast, then hunting. It nudged my chest with its nose and trotted out at my heel. The river was 30 seconds at badger speed. I scrubbed my face, rinsed my mouth, rubbed my teeth with my index finger, called it good, and the badger plunged its whole head under and drank like a swimming pool was draining. When it lifted out, it shook the water off in a wide arc, and I jumped sideways laughing at it for almost soaking me. It roared sheepishly, then made it clear with another roar that its stomach was empty. I pulled the snake meat and the damaged snake meat out of inventory, a clean kilogram and a damaged 200 grams, and tossed both into its open mouth. The badger swallowed in 3 chews and nodded that it would be content for a little while. For me, breakfast was the giant bread. The loaf was meant to feed a survivor for 3 full days, but I was no longer a normal survivor. Harmony had multiplied my stats and my appetite right alongside them, and I gnawed through a third of the loaf before I felt full, turning 3 days of food into 1 day. My mouth was cottony when I lowered the loaf. After that much bread, that was the deal. The chilled water came out and I cracked the cap. The first swallow was glacier cold, and I groaned with pleasure out loud. Last night's freezer trick had landed perfectly. I sealed the cap, slid the bottle straight back into inventory before any of the chill could leak, and decided not to touch it again until the afternoon heat peaked. I had a river right there. The bottled water was rare, and rare meant rationed. The sun was already pushing 37 degrees. The novice fur clothes balanced me at the upper edge of its band, and the grayscale giant armor's noted cooling property took another notch off. And the combination kept me functional in heat that would otherwise have laid me flat. I muttered that without scale armor I would already have been done for, and the badger answered me with a low warning roar from its throat that snapped my attention back to the trees. I dropped onto its back, kept low, and scanned the brush. A wild boar walked out of the leaf carpet toward the river, tongue lolling, easily 8 meters at the shoulder, smaller than my badger but bigger than anything I would have walked up to on Blue Star. I started to write it off as a boar until I looked at its feet. The paws were feline, lion paws on a pig face. I aimed the giant beast encyclopedia technique. The readout came back as pig-headed lion cub, strength being level peak, bloodline giant fierce beast, 2 talents named thick-skinned and roar, 4 skills named assault charge, agile run, fatal claw, and drowsy stomp, danger level high. The description called it a lion with a pig's head, common on plains and wilderness. Adults reaching around 130 meters, and Sean peak strength with rare individuals breaking into D level. The hide and tusks were noted as rare quality material the merchants prized. Being peak meant a beast capable of breaking into Huang at any moment, the same flag the crocodile had carried. The other skills read ordinary, but Fatal Claw caught my eye, and I tapped it for the detail. Excellent quality passive, level 1 of a maximum 5, 2 times damage bonus on hit with bleeding wounds that did not heal cleanly, and a smug little description claiming its claws were never dull. With passive specialization doubling everything the badger learned, that 2 times bonus became 4 times at base, and that was at level 1. I wanted that skill in my badger by the end of the morning. The pig-headed lion was strolling on a pressed flat beast path that had clearly worn into the ground over weeks of habit, the kind of trail that meant this stretch of riverbank was its private hunting ground, and nothing else dared cross it. Comfort had made it lazy. I patted the badger's neck, pointed at a clump of brush along the trail, and we slid into ambush. The pig-headed lion came on at the same easy amble. It twitched its neck once as it passed our hide, frowned at the chill that ran across its skin, and dismissed the feeling and kept walking, because in its head nothing on this beach could touch it, short of the turtle-belly giant crocodile in the river, or the shadow crow in the canopy. I clapped my hands. The earth badger launched in a single bound, dropped its full weight on the pig-headed lion's spine, pinned the head to the dirt under one paw, and bit clean down on the neck. The pig-headed lion was shock stupid for the first half second, and forgot to even cry out, and then the pressure on its neck found a nerve, and the cub let out a long mournful howl. It thrashed against the badger's mass and got nothing for it. The badger outmassed it, outstrengthed it, and outmanned it. The bite only tightened. I stood up on the badger's back, drew the black armor horn greatsword, jumped down, and walked over with the blade reversed. A perfect ambush, I told the cub. I drove the greatsword through the pig-headed lion's skull point first, all the way to the dirt. The body twitched twice and went still, and a treasure chest popped beside it. I pulled the blade free, wiped the gore off in the grass, and clapped the earth badger's flank to release the bite. The badger let go, stood up over its kill, and looked down at the pig-headed lion's body with frank drool. Lunch had only been snake bits. I chopped the pig head off with 2 strokes and rolled the body toward the badger to chew on while I worked. The hide and tusks were the only parts that mattered, and the badger could have the rest. Decomposition art on the head pinged me 2 pig-headed lion tusks, rare quality material, with the effect tag piercing, plus 2 processed premium pig ears at 1 kilogram each, rare quality ingredient. The tusk panel described it as a prime sword crafting material. Tusks with an effect were 3 times more valuable than plain ones because crafting weapons with effect tagged materials gave the finished weapon a 50% chance of inheriting the property. I laughed at the air and asked Goddess of Luck Mama whether this counted as a rare among rares. The processed premium pig ear panel told me it was the same grade as a plain ingredient, but treated specifically by the decomposition. That consuming one gave a slight permanent constitution boost, and that processed ingredients went for double the price of raw ones. So decomposition art's processed cuts were a hidden upgrade tier. I glanced sideways at the badger and groaned, because the snake meat I had thrown down its throat half an hour ago had probably included the same processed bonus I had just blindly fed to a cub. I pocketed both tusks in both ears and turned to the chest. The label read Lucky Bronze Treasure Chest. Bronze quality with a lucky prefix, drop range 2 to 4 items. The lucky prefix made me check my title bonuses, and the blessing of the goddess of luck had quietly reset overnight, which lined up with the 36-hour day rolling over at the panel's 36 o'clock mark. One blessing a day. Available now. I rubbed my chin and wondered whether I could drop the blessing on the chest itself. I tapped the blessing of the goddess of luck onto the lucky bronze chest. The panel snapped back that the chest's ownership was not mine and the blessing could not be applied. I stared at the line for a long second. So the chest was system-owned right up until I cracked the lid, and only the contents transferred. I shook my head, saved the blessing for the evening, and popped the chest open. 3 items inside. First was a bronze giant arm, rare quality giant beast equipment. The effect tag lightness. The description noting it provided both defense and offense when equipped by a behemoth. I rolled the piece in my hands and laughed under my breath. Behemoth gear. There was a whole second equipment economy on this battlefield I had not even known about, and the badger was about to wear its first piece of armor. I set it down and looked at the badger, who was still happily working on the pig-headed lion's torso, saving it for after lunch. Second was a jade bamboo gourd, uncommon quality special item, holding 10 liters of water with the effect of transforming the water inside, over roughly 3 days, into something called jade bamboo clear liquid. The description called the liquid a fruit wine-like drink that was not actually alcoholic. The gourd looked nothing like a gourd, and was clearly just a bamboo segment crafted from jade, but 10 liters of portable water on top of a slow auto brew of mystery juice was a stupidly good carry no matter the shape. Third was a treasure map, rare quality special item. A map recording the location of a hidden treasure with a winking description that what you actually dug up depended on luck. I unrolled it across my palm and stared. A topographical map blossomed open on the parchment. A treasure chest icon marked the dig site, and 3 skull icons sat between me and it, 2 flanking the chest and 1 squatting on the only path in. A small green dot blinked near the very edge of the map. I shifted my weight a step, and the dot crawled with me. So I was at the bottom corner of the entire region. The chest sat deep inside what looked like a giant forest, and 3 skull markers meant 3 cubs strong enough to register as obstacles between me and the treasure. I rolled the map and looked at my earth badger, who was now muzzle deep in the pig-headed lion's gut, and had reduced an 8-meter carcass to less than a third in the time it took me to read 3 item panels. I griped at it that its appetite was visibly growing day by day, and the badger gave me a happy roar through a mouthful of meat. The hide of the pig-headed lion was already shredded past saving, and the fur was junk, but the tusks were on me and that was all I had wanted from it. The badger went to wash off the blood while I sorted slots, and I put the bronze giant arm into the grid. 2 slots gone to it, and the gourd, and the treasure map small enough to fit alongside without a fuss. I needed to drop heavy items into the grass hut. The foundation was completely safe, every blow on the badger left the hut untouched, and a stash kept inside it would survive anything short of the badger dying. I set my palm against the badger's flank and stepped into the foundation. Inside the grass hut, I unloaded the 2 sickles, the 2 insect meats, the 14 blazing monkey cicada molts, the 2 blazing monkey cicada wings, the 27 junk stones, the 2 grayscale giant belly snake fangs, the complete turtle belly giant crocodile hide, the low-grade water attribute crystal, and the 2 pig-headed lion tusks. 9 slots freed in the inventory grid. The pile on the floor was a chaotic mess, and the sight of it bothered me. A shelf would fix it. I made a mental note to build one this afternoon and ducked back out of the foundation. The badger was waiting beside the river, wet and impatient and ready to keep moving. I pulled out the jade bamboo gourd and dipped it under the surface. The intake was slow, water glug-glugging in around the rim, and it took the better part of 2 minutes to draw a full 10 liters. I sealed the cap and stowed it. 3 days from now, it would be carrying 10 liters of jade bamboo clear liquid, and I was already curious about the taste. The earth badger climbed out of the river and shook off in another wide arc that I had to retreat from. I told it we were going back to the hollow. The badger fell in behind me with its damp coat steaming faintly in the heat. The walk back was short. The sun read close to 4 o'clock in the afternoon by the chat panel, which on a 36-hour day put the noon peak well behind us. I left the badger to bake itself dry in a sunny clearing outside the hollow, and went to gather the leaves I had set out yesterday. The leaves had cured stiff and warm under a full day of sun, and I scooped armloads into the cavern and spread them 2 layers thick across the rough wooden floor. 40 by 30 meters of floor, and after 20 minutes of work, the whole hollow was carpeted springy underfoot. No splinters anywhere. The badger could lie down without slivers in its paws, and I could walk barefoot if I wanted to. I was already thinking about that shelf for the grass hut. I went looking for a dead branch and found one not far from the hollow, 1 meter and change long, 5 or 6 meters across at the thick end, which by the standards of these giant trees was the trimmings off a twig. By any human standard, it was lumber enough for a small piece of furniture. I dragged it back into the clearing, drew the serrated axe, and started chopping. The serrated axe slid through dead wood the way it had slid through living bark, which meant the work was actual carving instead of brutal hacking. An hour of measured cuts, roughed out 4 legs, 2 side panels, 3 shelves and a back brace, and I knocked the pieces together against the trunk with my palm, because I had no nails and the joinery did not need to survive a storm. The whole shelf was rough and stripy and ugly in a way I was completely proud of. I tipped the sawdust off it, hoisted it onto my shoulder, and walked over to the badger, who was lazily sunbathing on the grass, with half its fur already dry. The badger lifted its head when I came near, gave a low welcoming roar, and laid back down. Fine. I set my palm against its flank and stepped into the foundation, shelf and all. The shelf made it through the entry, which was a quiet relief I had been bracing myself against. The door of the grass hut, however, did not cooperate. The shelf was easily a meter wide at the back brace and the doorway was barely 2/3 of that. I tried to angle it through and tried to twist it through and tried once more on a corner, and on the 3rd attempt I admitted out loud that I had been careless, and that the door problem had not even occurred to me. The shelf was not going inside without enlarging the door, which meant upgrading the foundation. I leaned the shelf against the outer wall of the hut and pulled up the foundation panel to check the upgrade conditions. The readout came up as grass hut, common quality, 3 by 2 square meters of building area, no sub-buildings, no current effect, with a friendly note that many special sub-buildings could improve a base beast's attributes and abilities. The level field showed an option to view upgrade conditions, and the entry or exit reminder noted that the foundation could not be entered or exited during combat. I tapped to view the upgrade conditions. The panel posted the upgrade conditions in clean order, 9 pieces of wood and 9 pieces of stone, with a small note that the original 10 and 10 had been knocked down 10% by builder. Generous numbers on the surface, until I remembered I had not pulled a single piece of proper wood or stone the system would accept. The 27 junk grade chips off the riverbank did not count. Chopping a tree probably did not register when I had only hollowed out a trunk, the way you carve a notch out of a wall, and the system likely wanted a tree felled whole, root to crown, on a behemoth kindergarten tree that meant several hundred meters of vertical mass and a meter-thick base. Half a day with the axe at minimum, and the novice window was already burning down. Not a fair trade when I had a treasure map in my inventory pointing at something a lot more interesting than firewood. I leaned the shelf against the outer wall of the grass hut, teleported back out, and brushed sawdust off my palms, deciding the shelf could wait. I cracked the treasure map open and gauged the green dot blinking near the lower corner. Distance to the first skull marker was roughly the same as the walk from my starting clearing to the river hollow, 2 hours at badger speed if nothing got in the way. The map had a quiet second use I was hoping would survive the dig, since if the parchment stayed intact after the chest came out, it would double as a regional map of the surrounding terrain. I told the badger to get up, that we were going treasure hunting. It gave me a long-suffering roar and climbed to its feet, and I swung onto its back, patted its shoulder, and pointed in the direction the map wanted. I sat cross-legged on the warm leaves piled across the badger's back, kept the map balanced on one knee, and scanned the brush. The panel header rolled past 30 degrees and kept climbing, reading 37 just after 6 in the morning, which on a 36-hour day meant noon was going to be hideous. My body was not sweating and neither was the badger's, though 2 days ago in the same weather it had been panting. A day in this place changed a body fast. The badger picked up a sound first, ears swiveling forward and dropping low into a crouch without breaking stride. I flattened across its spine and looked where it was looking. A red rooster was strolling through the tall grass 30 meters out, 5 meters tall at the chest, with a crown of orange flame-shaped feathers riding on its head like a paper hat that had caught fire. 3 hens trailing behind it. I swallowed hard, because those drumsticks were the size of my whole leg. The badger flattened its belly to the ground and started crawling forward with a stalker's patience I had not realized it owned. I lay flat on its back and let it run the approach, because its hunting instincts were sharper than my commands by an enormous margin, and one bad signal from me could blow the ambush. I aimed the giant beast encyclopedia technique at the rooster. The readout came back as red-bellied flame-crested chicken juvenile, strength Bing level peak, bloodline giant magic beast, talents flame crest fireball, and low-level fire attribute immunity. Skills claw strike and scurrying wing slap and continuous attack and iron peck. Danger level high. Common across most regions. Adults reaching 15 meters in TN level strength. The flame crest was the single most valuable part. The hens scanned the same except no flame crest, softer stats, and danger level low individually. A juvenile Bing peak that could already throw fire was the kind of skill I wanted on the badger by lunch. The grass here was nearly 3 meters tall, and the crawling earth badger stayed completely undercover while I drew the black armor horn greatsword. The plan was simple. Take a hen on the opening swing with ejection, let the badger take the rooster, and mop up the rest together. At about 20 meters the badger stopped, any closer risking the birds catching its outline through the stems, and 20 meters was fine since ejection forward carried me much further than its measly upward 2-meter range. I shifted up into a crouch, lined my stance, called ejection in my head, and felt the skill snap loose under me. The badger pounced in the same heartbeat, faster on its own legs than I was even with ejection charging me. One hen barely managed a confused cluck before its entire head separated on the backswing of my greatsword. The other 2 hens froze, and one was so terrified it laid an egg right there in the dirt, an egg as long as my forearm that rolled once in the grass and came to rest steaming gently. I landed, pivoted, triggered ejection again at the nearest paralyzed hen, and swept the greatsword across her neck on the way in. Another head came clean off. The last hen finally remembered to run, and immediately turned toward the rooster for help, only to look up and see the earth badger going to absolute town on her husband. She stopped dead with an open beak, then her head came off too. I flicked chicken blood off the blade and frowned at the spot where she had been, because she had looked like she was about to bolt, and then she had simply stopped, which was strange enough to note, and not worth chasing. The rooster had clocked the deaths of all 3 hens by the second ejection, and its rage broke through its strength ceiling on the spot. Its Bing peak readout snapped into Huang level in real time, and the breakthrough was not just numbers, because its body started swelling under its feathers as its bloodline pushed through. 5 meters shot up past 10, doubling in size, and the surge bounced the earth badger off it like a sneeze. The rooster did not turn to fight the badger first. It turned to look at its 3 decapitated hens, and its eyes went bloodshot. A scorching orange ball started gathering in its open beak, and I lifted my eyebrows at the show but did not bother moving, because the earth badger was already behind it. A Huang-level rooster turning its back on a Huang-level earth badger to charge a fireball on me. Whoever had given the rooster that much confidence was about to learn. The fireball was half-formed when the badger came up swinging. One open palm slapped the half-formed fireball clean out of the rooster's beak and snuffed it. Then the barrage started. Right paw, left paw, right paw again. Dozens of slaps in just over 10 seconds, several landing as heavy strikes that staggered the rooster's whole frame. The rooster's eyes glazed in the first second. By the third, it had no idea which way was up. The badger gave me a disdainful glance over its shoulder, like it could not believe the rooster had even tried, and then clapped both paws together on the rooster's temples in one full-body heavy strike. Blood ran from all 7 of the rooster's orifices at once, and it went down with a soft cluck and did not get up. Of course it did. The badger straightened over its kill, sat back on its haunches, and roared its satisfaction at the open sky now that lunch had arrived. The 4 chickens dropped 3 treasure chests, 2 black iron from the hens, and 1 bronze from the rooster, and the bronze chest carried a prefix on its label that I would chase down in a minute. The badger settled in beside the carcasses and watched me work, not even drooling, since it had only finished snake meat an hour ago. I crouched beside the nearest hen and pulled out a feather to start with. It came loose easily, gorgeous and red, and I tapped it for the readout, fully expecting a clean rare result, only for the panel to tell me it was junk quality. I sat back on my heels and frowned at the junk readout. On a feather the encyclopedia itself had called excellent crafting material. The most obvious explanation was that the decomposition art was the only proper way to harvest, but that could not be right either. Since decomposition art was a special skill, I had pulled off a roulette and the system would not gate basic loot behind a draw most survivors would never make. There was only one place to ask. I opened the chat channel and typed in a question to the district feed, asking as a confused newbie why the materials my base beast had killed for came out junk quality, and whether any of the big shots could explain. The replies started inside 2 seconds and not one of them touched the question. The first big shot apologized that he did not know either, and then asked whether I was a girl from the handle. The next message screamed that an actual girl had appeared, dirty in the best way, with a leering little laugh appended. The one after begged the previous 2 to behave or they would scare the girl away, then tagged Soki for a friend request. A fight broke out over who I had refused first. Someone went after a 4th person for sounding over 40 while addressing the channel as a girl. The whole feed turned into a brawl over my supposed femininity inside 10 messages. I rubbed my forehead and asked the air whether the handle Soki was really that feminine, since the channel had avatars and surely those should settle it. I tapped through to my own profile and went very quiet. The system had stamped me with a long-haired version of my own face. Long hair on me produced a face so feminine you could put it on a magazine cover and nobody would question it, and even my buzz cut barely shoved me back across the line into looking like a young man. The edit button was locked. The chat was going to think I was a girl until I corrected every message in the feed by hand, which I had no intention of doing. I rolled my eyes and chalked it up as the goddess's joke. I sent a follow-up asking the room to please get back on topic. Within half a minute, someone new pinged in and laughed that a bunch of people seemed to be ganging up on the old geezer again, a regular complainer who kept nagging the channel about respecting elders and asking for free food and water at 40-something years old. Several survivors chimed in to say they were grateful their families were with them in their foundations, while a lonelier voice asked sadly why so many had company when he was alone. That cracked something open. One of the chattier regulars stepped in and explained the family rules he had worked out from a full day of watching the feed. Households with kids under 18 sent one parent into the same foundation with the kid. Multiple kids under 10 brought the whole family together, and the same logic ran for the elderly, with anyone over 50 bringing their family along. Their foundations were larger than a solo survivor's, and households of 5 or more got a base beast plus a guardian beast, while adults between 18 and 50 were solo. The orphanage came back to me unprompted. Headmaster Grandma's kids, the ones I had been visiting every afternoon for the last few years, were nearly all under 18 and had no parents to be paired with. Where had they ended up? I tagged the chatty regular directly. His display name was a long pseudonym that translated roughly as, "I am not the all-knowing scholar," and I shortened it to all-knowing for my own sanity. I asked whether he knew how the orphans had been arranged, since their parents could not have been transported with them. A small chorus seconded the question with +1s rolling in. All-knowing laughed, apologized for missing my earlier ping, and answered properly. Younger orphans got assigned to a single adult survivor from the same orphanage. The pairing decided by intimacy ratings the system had quietly tracked, with a prompt firing on the receiving end to accept. Nobody in his region had refused, because the benefits were good enough to make the assignment worth taking. The pairing only triggered for adults over 25. That explained why I had received no prompt, since I had not crossed 25. A handful of the older volunteers at the orphanage would have, though, and the kids I had been visiting were probably with them now. One voice in the thread piped up that the system had paired her with 2 little sisters aged 2 and 5, and the package had come with a children's happy growth device she could not have managed without, plus a stack of items in her foundation that more than covered the additional load. I said this sounded like the best possible outcome under the circumstances. All-knowing came back one more time to circle back to my original question, which apparently he had not forgotten. The answer was as boring as it was clean. You needed tools, like a skinning knife, to harvest materials properly off a base beast or its kill. Without the tool, you needed a corresponding life skill like skinning technique. Otherwise, the system rated everything junk. I thanked him, closed the chat, and pulled up the iron pickaxe to verify. Tool. Excellent quality, effect 1% chance of double harvest while mining veins, each strike yielding 1 ore. A clean tool entry confirming that tools harvested materials properly and that skills could substitute. No tool, no skill, no proper material. Which made my decomposition art a much better skill than I had given it credit for. Because it did not just substitute for the tool, it processed the material at the same time. The drops came out finished, semi-prepared, ready for cooking or crafting. Exactly the kind of upgrade you would expect from a special skill. I stood up over the larger hen and triggered decomposition art. The panel pinged me 10 half-kilogram cuts of chicken breast, 2 processed large chicken drumsticks, and 20 red-bellied flame-crested chicken feathers. Every cut excellent quality. The drumsticks came out as 2 complete intact drumsticks the size of a whole leg each, labeled processed, meaning seasoning was already in. My mouth started watering before I had even finished reading the panel. Of course it did. I triggered decomposition art on the second hen, which dropped 10 more cuts of chicken breast, 2 processed chicken wings, 2 more large drumsticks, and 20 feathers. The third hen came apart differently and dropped a single complete, plucked, processed red-bellied flame-crested hen and another 20 feathers, the skill clearly working without half measures. I told myself out loud that I was now rich, that tonight I would celebrate with a large processed drumstick, and that I was not going to roast the whole hen because that would be a waste. That left the rooster, so I trotted over and triggered decomposition art on the carcass. 2 processed super large drumsticks, 2 processed 1 kilogram cuts of chicken breast, 100 complete red-bellied flame-crested chicken feathers, and 1 flame crust. Everything off the rooster came out at rare quality, with the panel noting that any of it consumed would slightly raise physique and strengthen the body. The complete feather red rare quality material with low-level fire immunity and low-level fire enhancement, an expensive crafting material for magic tools. The flame crest itself was the main event, uncommon quality, the rank above rare on this scale, with intermediate fire enhancement and flame crest fireball tagged on the effect line. The description called it the single most valuable material the species produced, difficult to collect, easily damaged, with a chance to graft the flame crest fireball ability onto any magic tool crafted with it. Exactly the talent I had been hoping to pull off this fight. My inventory was already groaning, 10 new stacks off the 4 birds on top of 3 unopened chests and the existing load, leaving 7 empty slots and putting me 3 short of what I needed. The math came out fine if I dropped the bulky materials into the grass hut. The hen feathers and the rooster feathers did not stack, since the rooster feathers ran nearly 3 or 4 meters per feather and read a different color and quality, while the hen feathers were a touch over a meter long and softer in tone. I pulled the bronze giant arm out and walked over to the earth badger to equip it. The bracer wrapped its left forepaw and grew up its leg in a single smooth pulse, settling as a bronze-plated arm that ran from claw to shoulder. The badger stared at its newly armored left paw with a stunned little tilt of the head, moved the limb in slow experimental arcs, and gave a roar of satisfaction when the plate flexed cleanly with the muscle, freeing 1 inventory slot in the process. I teleported into the grass hut, dropped the jade bamboo gourd into the outside cabinet, then placed the boulder treads and the eye protection visor and the iron pickaxe onto the shelf I had built, and leaned against the wall, freeing 4 more slots and leaving 12 empty cabinet compartments to absorb the chicken haul. I teleported out, gathered the chicken meat and feathers off the kill ground, and stuffed everything I could into my inventory in one pass, leaving 2 slots. The rooster feathers refused to fit into the grass hut without folding them, and I would not risk folding a rare quality intact feather that depended on being complete, so they stayed in inventory while the hen feathers went into the cabinet. I turned to the 3 treasure chests sitting in a row on the grass, and reached for the first black iron. I popped both black iron chests at once and 5 items came out across the 2. The goddess of luck had not slacked on me. The first item was a storage cabinet, spatial item, rare quality, 6 spatial slots, with each slot holding up to 99 identical items, with a description noting that even the most common spatial item ran expensive on the open market. I laughed and asked Goddess of Luck Mama if she had been listening. The cabinet was a perfect little box of 30 by 30 centimeters, a literal pocket-sized shelf that swallowed nearly 100 stacks. The second item was a feather duster, magic item, excellent quality, effect dust removal technique, with the panel cheerfully noting it could clean dust quickly and could only clean dust. A magic item that did one thing was fine, since magic items were rare enough that I would take it. The third item was a red-bellied flame crown cape. Magic item, excellent quality, effect warmth and lowest level fire immunity, sewn from leftover red-bellied flame-crested feather scraps. Sleeping curled into the earth badger's flank for warmth had been workable but never restful, and the cape solved it. The fourth was a red-bellied flame-crested head feather. Equipment, rare quality, effect low-level fire bonus, crafted from feathers and flame vine silk, and slightly boosting any fire-based ability. The piece was loud and ugly, but the effect was real and the market would price it. The fifth was a base extension card, special item, rare quality, effect base area +1, with a note that even at +1 it was rare and sought after, so I used it on the spot. The panel chimed back successful, and when I checked the foundation panel, the grass hut now read 4 by 3 square meters. Up from the original 3 by 2, the category still said common, the level still said 1, the upgrade condition still said 9 wood and 9 stone, but the floor was a third bigger overnight and the shelf would fit through the door without any axe work. I closed the foundation panel and turned to the last chest, the surpassing bronze. The label alone hinted the contents were going to land above the standard bronze drop curve, and when I lifted the lid, 4 items were sitting inside. The Grand Slam Cap. I told the empty grass that I liked Goddess of Luck Mama's taste. The first item was a capacity cabinet. Spatial item. Epic quality, 10 spatial slots with each slot holding up to 999 identical items. 1 full tier above the storage cabinet at more than triple the market price. Between the 2 cabinets I had picked up 16 extra slots and roughly 10,000 stack capacity in one fight. The grass hut was about to look organized for the first time since I had moved in. The second item was a blazing red staff. Weapon. Epic quality, effect low-level fire bonus and fireball technique. Crafted from leftover flame crest scraps and fire spiritual tree branches, with energy input triggering a fireball technique on command. I had no energy in my body to feed the staff, and no idea how to obtain energy yet. But the chat channel had carried voices describing awakened survivors whose magic-like skills wore them down with dizziness if they cast too often. The consensus reading being that some kind of mental energy was being consumed. So the resource existed, and the system would let me at it eventually, maybe through a profession later. The third item was a simple chicken coop. Base building, rare quality effect hatches eggs, housing up to 4 chicken-type creatures and taking up 3 square meters of foundation floor. Egg freedom for the man who had just decapitated 3 hens, one of whom had laid an egg on the way down. I turned and looked at the half-meter egg, still sitting in the grass where the second hen had popped it out, almost the size of a winter melon, with an ostrich egg looking like a quail egg next to it. And the coop would hatch it. The fourth was a Transcender's fishing rod, unique item, excellent quality. Effect: the Transcender never returns empty-handed, with a daily bait counter at 1 of 1 resetting every day. The description called it the lowest grade fishing rod the Transcender had ever crafted, also the first one he ever made, and the only one of his fishing rods that had ever fallen into the outside world. The Transcender's fishing rod always caught strange items, the description said, though it could never seem to catch the fish he had originally wanted. I held the rod up, an unfamiliar bamboo light in my palm, the Transcender prefix clearly not a flavor word. Excellent quality on a unique item was almost certainly underselling it. I murmured at the rod that I had no idea what it might catch, and that I was deeply looking forward to finding out. The morning's chest haul already paying me back several times over even if I did not see another giant beast for the next 20 hours. I sat in the grass and organized everything before I lost track of what I owned. The personal backpack landed at 10 of 20 slots, carrying the day's essentials and the 2 large processed drumsticks for tonight and tomorrow's lunch. The wooden shelf inside the grass hut absorbed the small material stacks I did not need on me, the sickles and the cicada parts, and the snake fangs and the lion tusks, and the boulder treads, and the jade bamboo gourd, and the eye protection visor, and the iron pickaxe, and the feather duster. The storage cabinet went full at 6 of 6 on the bulky pieces, crocodile hide, blazing red staff, the 2 blueprints, the junk stones, the equipment grade head feather. The capacity cabinet went full at 10 of 10 on the entire chicken haul, the super large drumsticks and wings, The breast cuts both processed and plain, the smaller wings and drumsticks, the whole processed hen, 60 hen feathers, 100 complete rooster feathers, and the flame crest. I came out of the grass hut with a quietly smug grin. The capacity cabinet had absorbed everything without complaint, and the personal pack still had 10 open slots. I pulled the treasure map back out, swung up onto the earth badger's back, and pointed at the first skull marker. The badger started forward and immediately stopped because the bronze armor on its left forepaw made the gait uneven. Then it tested an idea and the bronze armor disappeared and the gait evened out. It tested the idea again, the armor reappeared, then vanished, and the badger trotted off contentedly with the bracer hidden. Hidden equipment did not function, the panel had told me, but the badger could spool the armor back at the next fight. Fine. The green dot on the map had crept halfway to the first skull, another hour at this pace. The blessing of the goddess of luck was sitting unused on my title, refreshed for the day, and the plan had always been to drop it on the treasure map before the dig itself, so the buff carried through to the chest under the dirt. Tomorrow's blessing would land on the Transcender's fishing rod since the rod was already the highest pedigree item I had pulled. The sun was pushing into the high 30s, and the novice fur coat and the grayscale giant armor held my body temperature steady around 26. Bare sun on my forehead still drew sweat though, and the combination kept the heat stroke off without pretending I was indoors. I settled the treasure map across my knee and opened the chat channel to read while we rode, because the chat had a feature I had not properly used yet, the trade window. Every now and then a survivor would post a trade offer in the district feed, and I had 3 trades a day to spend with no carryover, which meant picking carefully, but also that the right offer could land me something off a wish list I did not even know I had. I scrolled the feed slowly. The channel population still read 100,000, the number unmoved overnight. During the novice period, the Cubs did not auto-aggro survivors as long as nobody provoked them, so nobody had died yet in our district, and nobody was likely to today either unless a survivor starved, which was implausible on day 2. A trade offer caught my eye partway down the feed. The survivor had a blueprint up for sale and was willing to trade it for at least 2 pounds of food and a liter of water, with private message preferred. A blueprint, huh? The post had not said what the blueprint was, which was either a sign the seller did not want to spoil the surprise, or a sign the blueprint was not impressive enough to lead with. But either way, I had food and water to spare and 3 trades to burn, so it was worth asking. I tapped the post and opened a private message. The seller's handle read Yuha, and Soki sent a polite hello asking what kind of blueprint Yuha had on offer. A little more than 10 seconds passed before Yuha replied that she would send an image so I could see for myself, and that if I did not like the price, we could keep talking. An image attached to the message and unfurled into a panel readout. The panel read name wooden bench, category blueprint, quality excellent, effect that it could be learned at the crafting table, and that once learned, wooden benches could be crafted. I read it twice, then rubbed my chin and let the breath out of my nose. No wonder this trade offer had stayed open in the feed long enough for me to find it. The thing on offer was a furniture blueprint for a wooden bench. Of all possible items, I could make a dozen of those from a single dried branch. Yuha pinged me again before I had finished writing off the wooden bench blueprint as garbage, asking outright whether I would take it. I rubbed my chin and decided to bite at a price I would not regret. Soki messaged back that the blueprint was not exactly thrilling, but I would take it for 2 pieces of meat, and that the river water would have to come once I made it back to the bank since I was nowhere near it. She agreed and asked whether to trade now or later, and I told her to give it a few hours, since 3 trades a day was the hard cap and I was not about to burn 2 slots on a single deal. By splitting it, the plan was 2 pieces of white insect meat and a barrel of river water, and on the water I could afford to be generous, since I would just carve a bigger barrel. The general feed already had a fair number of survivors selling water at normal prices, the river being big enough that out of 100,000 survivors, a few thousand had probably stumbled across it on day 1. Without the trade limit, selling water could have made me modestly rich on food. I pulled the treasure map open across my knee while we rode, the green dot close to the first skull marker. I patted the badger's flank to slow it, and we eased down at the edge of a giant tree forest, the first skull only a short walk past the tree line. I could have skipped it, since the pair of guardians at the actual treasure site later were the unavoidable ones, but the novice Grace was still active, and walking past a free yellow tier kill felt like leaving change on a table. I held the treasure map flat on my palm and laid the blessing of the goddess of luck on it. The system asked politely whether I really wanted to spend today's blessing on the map, and I confirmed. The parchment flared in a hard gold glow for about 3 seconds, then dimmed back, the readout updating to blessed treasure map, special item quality rare to unknown under divine power influence, introduction noting a chance to turn up a divine item at the dig site, and a guaranteed special item. I let out a low whistle, because the blessing kept getting better the more I learned about it. I rolled the map out fully, and the chest icon had turned gold, which I expected, but all 3 skull icons had gone gold too. I muttered at the parchment asking what the gold skulls meant, since strengthened guardians did not sound right when the blessing was on my side, then let it go, because if I could not read the map I would go look with my own eyes. The badger took the new heading, and we cleared the tree line a few minutes later to find the first guardian waiting, a giant bear roughly the size of my badger. I aimed the giant beast encyclopedia technique at it, and the panel came up as Treasure Guardian Mandala Giant Bear, Cub, Strength Huang Level, Bloodline Giant Fierce Beast. Talents Great Strength and Thick-Skinned, Skills Thick-Skinned and Heavy Strike and Mandala Roar, and Hissing Bite. Danger Level High. The description noted the species ran the giant forests. Adults hit 170 meters at TN level strength, and the hide and claws and gall were the parts worth pulling. Same strength tier as my Badger, with a bloodline 2 ranks below the Badger's giant mutated beast line. A clean matchup. Stepping in personally was a bad idea, because 2 behemoths colliding at 14 meters of body length each did not leave room for a flea like me in the middle, and one misplaced paw would put me through the ground. Worse, fighting alongside the Badger would make it second-guess every swing while it tracked where I had landed. I swung down, slapped its flank to release the leash, and told it to go nuts. The Earth Badger roared so loud the canopy shivered and went straight for the bear. I almost felt sorry for the Mandala Giant Bear, because the Earth Badger species was built for a brawl from birth, and mine had a giant mutated beast bloodline on top of that, so a roughly even sparring partner was a small mercy the Badger was going to enjoy thoroughly. It crashed into the bear at full speed, and the two went down in a brawl that shook leaf litter out of the canopy. The long, slender Badger against the plump, thick-fatted bear, mass and padding against mutated bloodline. Neither side had an active skill to break the rhythm. Just bear thump, Badger claw, bear bite, Badger heavy strike. The Badger's passive specialization fed every melee strike, and in close quarters it had no equal, while the bear's thick skin twice over kept it durable, but durability without an answering attack was just slow defeat. Flesh-skin separation kept the Badger's bleeding to a dribble, and the bear's claws were not deep enough to reach muscle, so by the time the two paused, to circle the bear was streaked red from neck to belly, while my Earth Badger was cosmetically scratched. The brawl picked back up at full wildness, and 40 minutes after the first collision the Mandala Giant Bear gave out, the body crashing down hard enough to rattle the smaller trees. The Badger roared its victory at the sun, and I had to smile, because it had also collected wounds it had been ignoring for the joy of the fight, and after one long roar it sat down and started licking. That gave me a problem. If the first Guardian was Huang level, the next two were Huang level too, and the Badger could not walk into them at half stamina. I left it to its grooming and walked over to the corpse, and decomposition art took the body apart in one breath. The panel pinged processed Mandala Giant Bear hide, 2 fine bear paws, 1 fine bear gallbladder, and 21 kilogram cuts of bear meat. 4 slots gone in 1 decomposition, but the trade was beyond fair since the gallbladder and paws were rapid growth feed for the Badger. The carcass dissolved and left a faintly glowing bronze chest behind. The panel called it Bronze Treasure Chest affected by divine power. Quality bronze, effect on opening 2 to 4 items with a 50% chance of a special item. The description noting that even a sliver of divine power had altered the chest's essence outright. The blessing was paying off twice over, and I cracked the lid on 3 items already above the floor. The first was an endless bear honey pot, special item, rare quality, producing 100 grams of bear honeybee honey per day. The description noting the pot was an accidental byproduct of the blessing nudge. I half wondered whether bear honeybees were the chubby bees I remembered from a video before the transmigration, then dismissed it, since adult bees on this battlefield probably ran 10 meters across. The second item was the thick-skinned skill, passive rare quality, level cap 3, ordinary damage reduction and durability enhancement, and I assigned it to the Earth Badger on the spot, who flicked an ear mid-grooming and kept licking. The third was a Mandala heavy hammer, weapon, rare quality, effect heavy strike, crafted from the bear's leg bone. A 2-meter shaft I tried not to laugh at. A bone club with a real heavy strike effect. Ironic in a useful way against canine giant beasts, but still a glorified club. The chest tally came out at 7 items counting the 4 decomposition pulls, and with thick-skinned absorbed into the Badger, 6 pieces still went into my pack, draining the slots I had freed at the chicken kill right back to nothing. I earmarked the fine bear paws and the fine bear gallbladder for the Badger, since with Harmony quietly buffing every gain into him, the right call was always to feed the base beast first. I swung back onto the Badger's back and pointed it at the next skull, since the plan was reconnaissance only. Giant beasts on the battlefield would not aggro on a survivor during the novice window, but guarding a treasure site was a separate edge case I was not about to bet a life on. We arrived a short ride later and saw the pair, at which point the Earth Badger immediately tried to charge. I slapped its flank hard enough that the slap rang in my own palm and yelled at it about what it thought it was doing, and the Badger whined and looked back at me as if I had cheated. I rolled my eyes and reminded it that it was already chewed up, had stamina to burn but not enough to take 2 Huang-level Guardians fresh, and that the only reason I had brought it here was to look. The Badger lay down dejectedly and stared at the dirt, and I patted its head and turned to look at the Guardians properly. A pair of winged snakes about 14 meters long, 2 bird-like wings each, scaled in vivid color with sword-shaped tails. I aimed the giant beast encyclopedia technique at them, and the readout came back as twin-feathered serpents. Cubs, strength Huang level, bloodline giant demonic beast, talents twin flight and feather poison, skills twin entanglement and feather shot and venom spray and rapid advance and spike pierce. The description noted they always appeared as a male and female pair, lived high on cliffs, and at adult size hit 180 meters at Tian level peak, the wings being the prize crafting material and the fangs and tail swords running second tier. I cocked an eyebrow at the feather poison talent and tapped through. The wings carried the poison, Feathershot was built to deliver it, and twin flight paired with twin entanglement so the two snakes fought as a synchronized two-body team. Excellent teamwork was their entire pitch, and that was the bad news. The good news was that the earth badger species was famously unbothered by poison, and toxicity adaptation at perfect quality made mine flatly immune, so feather poison and venom spray were going to do almost nothing. The remaining threat was the tail sword, which actually frightened me, because the badger's hide was tough but a sword-shaped spike pierced through the gut would still go through. The treasure dig itself sat under the snake's nest behind them. I tapped the badger to turn around, since we were going back, and I was already turning over a plan on the ride home, one that took advantage of the novice grace exactly as the system did not intend. The cleanest method was to pre-amputate. As long as nobody saw me as actively hostile during the novice window, I could walk up and chop a tail off two cubs who had no idea they were being measured for surgery. The badger would distract them from the front, since the wings were the active threat, and the snakes would track the louder enemy, and I would come at the tails from behind, take both, then let the badger engage cleanly. That was the only reliable angle short of overwhelming power, which I did not have, and the plan was made. The route back was different from the route in, and I scanned for any unlucky cub since the map handled navigation. A giant rock surfaced in the dirt a few hundred meters off, and I sat up, because the angle and the slope of the dirt around it read mineral vein. I slapped the badger to redirect, jumped down and walked the perimeter, reddish-brown shading toward orange, wet and rusty smelling, the seam running wider than I could see, so it was limonite almost certainly. Iron ore that rusted on water contact, weathered here through plenty of seasons. I teleported into the foundation, grabbed the iron pickaxe, and teleported back out. The moment I had it in hand, the limonite had a panel of its own that had not been there a second earlier. Limonite mixed ore vein, category small ore vein, quality excellent, description noting low iron content with stone making up more than half. I dropped the pickaxe to test, the panel vanished, and when I picked it back up the panel returned in the same blink. I shook my head, impressed, because tools unlocked material panels, and without the right one you were not just refused drops, you could not even see what you were standing on. A wide open scam for any survivor who had not figured it out, and a rule the chat had probably explained while I was off in the field, so I would skim the feed later. The badger lay down in the shade and watched me work, the pickaxe ringing on the limonite, the system pinging each cut at stone times 3 and limonite times 1, while the numbers piled up under the morning sun. After 2 solid hours, I had cleared every surface section, the final tally landing at 214 stone and 78 limonite, with the seam continuing under the dirt where I could not reach without a real dig. I wiped my forehead and grumbled about being a laborer in the heat. The pickaxe was visibly chewed at the edge, the sun red close to noon, and the badger had already retreated under the deepest shade, so I marked the vein on the treasure map and walked back for lunch. We made it home to the front of the tree hole and the badger went horizontal in a cool spot while I cleared the bonfire ground. I stepped into the foundation, scooped every junk-grade stone out of the grass hut, and stepped back out to build a ring. 27 stones formed a 3-meter fire pit, and I gathered dry leaves for kindling, dry branches for fuel, shaped 2 Y-sticks into a spit, and worked the friction fire under the noon sun, which in this dry weather was almost trivial. A sun-baked leaf, a few minutes of vigorous rubbing, sparks, and the bonfire caught fast. I rinsed the great sword at the river and skinned a dry branch into a skewer. I pulled a processed large chicken drumstick from the capacity cabinet and skewered it, the leg alone about 1.5 meters long on the funny side of grotesque. I scored it with the great sword to make sure it cooked through, and the cuts let the seasoning and the fragrance out at the same time. The clearing started smelling like a holiday meal inside a few minutes. Grilling I knew how to do, since I had cooked for the kids at the orphanage on plenty of weekends. The drumstick turned and dripped and turned again, and after half an hour the outside was crackling and the inside was firm. I cut down to the bone with the greatsword to check, and it was cooked clean through. A long string of dripping sounds rolled in from behind me, and I turned to find the earth badger sitting right at my shoulder, drooling onto the dirt with its eyes fixed on the drumstick. I asked whether it wanted to eat, and the badger nodded so hard its whole head bounced. I told it to wait a minute, stepped into the foundation, came back out with 2 unprocessed drumsticks, skewered both, and set them on a second Y-stick rig over the same fire. I explained slowly that the badger now had its own dinner to roast. Self-sufficiency, I said in my best deadpan, was the path to abundance. I walked away with my drumstick and started in, while the badger stared at the 2 raw drumsticks on the rig with the bewildered expression of a college student handed a wrench. The meat was an absolute joy, because I had wanted to eat a chicken leg this big since I was a boy and my old paycheck had never allowed it. Now I was tearing strips off a leg longer than my own thigh, and even at juvenile grade the red-bellied flame-crested chicken was giant demonic beast bloodline, the flesh dense with usable energy. I made it through about half the leg before I had to stop. The badger was slowly turning its skewer, mimicking my earlier motions with the careful concentration of someone faking it, and its drumstick had already gone matte black on the outside. The badger finally pulled one off the fire, sniffed it, took a tentative bite and brightened, because cooked food beat raw food apparently, even when the cooked food was charred. It swallowed half of the first drumstick in a gulp and started on the second. And then a wave of properly cooked drumstick wafted from my direction and the badger's whole face fell. I walked over with the remaining half of my leg, since I could not finish it and tossing food was a sin, and told it to open its mouth. The badger opened, I dropped the cooked half in, and it crunched through with an expression of total revelation. I left the badger to eat at leisure and got back to work, tossing a few more branches onto the fire and picking up a wooden post to carve, since the yuha trade was waiting on water and I needed containers for my own use. Anyway, the serrated axe slid through the post the way good steel slides through dead pine, and inside a stretch I had 2 wooden barrels each about 1 meter tall and half a meter wide, with handles cut into the sides for lifting. I carried the barrels down to the river with the badger trailing behind, freshly satisfied on cooked meat, and let it drink while I filled the barrels and dumped them into the base beast for transport. The foundation never shifted in transit, so even sloshing water held a level surface inside. Back at the hollow, I pulled the barrels out, opened the chat channel, and messaged Yuha that I had the water and food ready, and she replied within a dozen seconds that she was very free. The trade invite popped, I tapped accept, and the trade page came up with our 2 avatars at the top. Yuha laid down her wooden bench blueprint, while I laid down 2 1-kilogram pieces of bear meat and 1 full barrel of river water, and then on impulse I grabbed a half-burnt dead branch out of the fire and dropped it in too. Both sides hit confirm and the trade completed in the same blink. Yuha thanked me 3 times in a row and told me I was a genuinely good person, and I glanced at the messages, did not reply, and closed the chat. The favor had cost me nothing meaningful, and back at the orphanage the neighbors had often quietly slipped us things we needed, so passing one forward sat easy enough on me. I dropped the wooden bench blueprint into the cabinet inside the grass hut, walked back to the fire with the second barrel, and hung it on a sturdy hook over the flames to boil for drinking. While the water heated, I picked up the serrated axe and walked to the nearest giant tree, the trunk hundreds of meters wide at the base. The panel read Ju food tree, category plant, quality common, description noting it was an ordinary species common across the giant beast world. Just as suspected, the tool was the gate to the material panel here too, and I reset my shoulders, because cutting one down from the outside was going to take hours even with the badger swinging beside me. The Jufu tree was not particularly hard wood, which I knew from chipping out the tree hollow before, but the sheer size meant hours of swing time no matter how soft the timber. I sighed, whistled the badger over, and we got to work, the axe ringing and the badger's claws ripping, and by the 3rd hour we had cut more than halfway through. I was not worried about the trunk falling on us, because we had hollowed out the cutting notch wide enough that even if the trunk split at the cut, we could lie down inside the gap and let it pass over. After more than 4 hours of joint swinging, the trunk finally went, slamming sideways hard enough to drum the dirt under my boots, the canopy crashing through the lower trees on impact. The Jufu tree lay quiet on the ground, and the system pinged me wood times 100. I blinked and shook my head, because a complete cut at the base banked the entire trunk into materials at once, no carving required. The fallen trunk was leftover wood I could not be bothered to pick up, since picking it up would only have given me junk-grade pieces, so I left it where it lay. 100 clean wood, enough to upgrade the foundation. I stepped into the base beast, opened the foundation panel, and tapped upgrade, and the teleport snapped me back outside. A short wait followed before the system pinged base upgrade complete, base area plus 10, and obtained crafting table, placed inside the base. I teleported back in to look, and the grass hut itself was still a common quality 2x2 shack with no visible change. But the surrounding base area had expanded outward and a crafting table now sat near the wall. The foundation panel updated to grass hut base quality common, area 14 by 13 square meters, sub-buildings none, effect none, level 1. The crafting table panel read, crafting table, special item, quality excellent, craft and processable and trait lists, empty, storage 0 of 2, the introduction calling it a battlefield-issued device for survivors. A manual sat alongside. Excellent quality capped output at rare. Every survivor's starting crafting table was excellent with upgrades possible. Anything crafted but not collected went into on-table storage, and the crafting table could not leave the base. I tapped the storage slots open, and a crafting table tray roulette was already sitting in one slot. Special item, quality remarkable, effect on use grant a crafting table trade at perfect quality or below. Description noting it was the reward for the first 100,000 survivors to upgrade their base. I raised an eyebrow and decided right there that tomorrow's blessing of the goddess of luck was getting spent on the trait roulette and nothing else. I walked into the grass hut, picked up the perforated charcoal blueprint and the wooden stool blueprint and dropped both into the crafting table to learn them, and the unlock pinged through. Perforated charcoal came up as material. Quality rare. Effect long burning and high temperature. Material required wood. With common wood producing excellent charcoal and excellent wood producing rare charcoal. A real return on every grade. Charcoal was about to get expensive once the novice window ended, since the night temperature was already swinging hard and the chat had been speculating it could drop below 0 before long. Wooden stool read is furniture quality excellent, effect-based comfort +10, marked unique, material required lumber. The description noting that higher base comfort triggered mysterious events both good and bad, with only one instance of any given furniture taking effect. Mixed good and bad was a coin flip in theory, but for any survivor sitting on a mutated bloodline base beast with a lucky title, the toss tilted favorable by default. The catch was lumber, a processed material I did not have the blueprint for yet, so it went into the filed pile. I tapped to view the level 2 upgrade conditions, which came back as stone times 45, wood times 45, excellent stone times 9, excellent wood times 9. The excellent requirement was the gate, and I had exactly 0 of either, so level 2 was not happening soon. I closed the upgrade panel and pulled out the simple chicken coop instead, since the red-bellied flame-crested egg was overdue for hatching. I placed the coop in an open corner of the base. A 3 square meter fenced pen unfolded out of the placeholder, simple wooden rails around a small henhouse. I carried the egg out of the grass hut and set it carefully in the nest, and a countdown appeared above it reading, hatching in progress, 72 hours. 3 days was not unreasonable, and I scratched my chin and wondered out loud what the chick would eat once it cracked the shell. Probably meat, given the parents had been carnivorous fire throwers, but I would hold the giant bread aside in case it ate grain. I organized the materials piling up in my pack and around the grass hut, then teleported out to check the time. The sun read past 4 in the afternoon, about 1 hour of daylight left before dark, and I was not about to waste my daily Transcender's fishing rod use. I pulled the rod out and walked toward the river with the badger tailing close behind on guard. I cast at the bank. The bobber hit the water with a soft splash, and a few minutes later it began to bob up and down as if mocking me. I was no angler, but I had watched enough fishing videos to know patience was supposed to win the day, and the moment I thought it, I overrode it and yanked the line. Because the Transcender's rod never came home empty, and patience was for fish I actually intended to catch. Water sprayed and an object burst out of the river on the end of my line, and I caught it mid-air, but the hook had not even bitten, because whatever I had just landed was tangled in the line itself. The fishing rule clearly stretched to the limit of the wording. I scratched the back of my head and grumbled that this thing was almost too forced for words. The object in my hand was a book, pulled out of a river, completely dry, not a single drop on the cover. The line on the Transcender's fishing rod vanished the second I had a solid grip on the book, leaving only the empty rod. So the daily use really was once, and the catch sealed the cast. I stowed the rod and finally turned my eyes on the book in my palm. The book in my palm had a panel even before I had brushed the river water off my fingers, which it had not actually picked up since the cover was bone dry. The readout came up as Mead's alchemy notes, special item, uncommon quality, effect on use granting between 1 and 3 potion blueprints at a maximum quality of rare. Description noting that Mead was an intermediate alchemist who knew hundreds of potions, was gifted, and forgot his own notebooks so often that he had already lost track of more than 100 of them. I read the description twice and asked the heir how a man who forgot 100 notebooks ever made it past apprentice. The system declined to answer. I rinsed my hands properly in the river first, mostly on superstition, since clean hands felt like better odds before opening a roulette. I shook the water off, settled my back against the trunk, and triggered the notebook. The panel chimed 2 blueprints into my inventory in the same breath, a low-grade blood red potion blueprint and a low-grade sleep potion blueprint, and I let out a low whistle because 2 on a single use was already a generous roll. I jumped onto the earth badger's back, slapped its flank, and pointed it home to the tree hollow. The blood red potion blueprint came up as blueprint category, rare quality, learnable at the crafting table to craft blood red potions, with the description noting that the potion was alchemist Mead's own work and healed wounds far better than ordinary healing drafts. A real rare quality healing potion blueprint, the exact thing the earth badger needed before tomorrow's fight, was sitting in my pack from a single fishing rod use, and I made no effort to keep the grin off my face. The sleep potion blueprint read as blueprint, excellent quality, learnable at the crafting table to craft low-grade sleep potions, the description calling it a very common blueprint, and one of the practice potions for apprentice alchemists. Less flashy than the blood red, but useful in its own way, since putting a giant beast to sleep mid-fight was the kind of trick I would happily file away for later. I teleported into the base, walked to the crafting table, and dropped both blueprints into it, and the unlocks pinged through one after the other. The blood red potion crafting page came up as potion, rare quality, effect healing injuries, required materials 2 blood red grass, 1 blazing monkey cicada larva cicada shell, 500 milliliters of water, and 1 container, the description noting the healing was strong enough to handle anything short of broken bones or torn tendons. Blood red grass was the only piece I did not already have, and the blazing monkey cicada larva cicada shell was the same shell I had peeled off plenty of giant trees during the slow days. The sleep potion's required materials were a single sleep flower with water and container. Simpler still. I teleported back out, set the earth badger to watch the bonfire, and triggered ejection to launch myself up the nearest giant tree trunk. Every giant tree on the ride home had carried a handful of blazing monkey cicada larva cicada shells, and an hour of climbing across the surrounding trees turned up 153 shells, more than enough for whatever blood dread potion production I could realistically run. The sun was sliding low by the time I came back down, so I called it and dropped onto a stone next to the fire. The earth badger nudged my shoulder hello, and I rubbed its head and looked properly at the wounds along its flank. The deeper cuts were still raw, and without a blood dread potion in hand, the only treatment was rest and protein, which would push recovery to a day or two at the earliest. The novice grace expired tomorrow though, and walking into the twin-feathered serpents at less than full strength was not a plan I was willing to ride into. Bloodgrass was the missing piece, and the chat channel would tell me whether anyone had pulled it from a chest. I pulled the fine bear paw and the fine bear gallbladder out of the pack and offered them to the badger, since accelerating its strength was the same thing as accelerating its healing. The earth badger inhaled the gallbladder in one swallow, then pointed at the fire and looked at me with the patience of a tutor whose student had missed an obvious point. I asked whether it wanted the paw cooked, and it nodded so hard its whole head bounced. Apparently raw meat had been demoted, with even dogs declining to touch it. I skewered the paw on a wooden stick over the fire and laid 5-pound cuts of bear meat on a second rig beside it. The pack still held a small jar of bear honeybee honey from the endless honey pot, which the panel read as material category, rare quality. Effect restoring energy, description noting that behemoth bear honeybees collected it from various flowers, and that it figured into many potions and medicinal dishes. The honey out of the jar was not liquid but a soft bouncy gel that smeared onto the meat in a thin glaze. I brushed each piece, set them turning, and let them sweat under the flame. Half an hour later, the 5 steaks were giving off a heavy, enticing smell, and the badger was already drooling onto the dirt. I handed 3 to it and kept 2 for myself, since I had eaten half a drumstick at lunch, and the energy was still carrying me. The badger chewed with full commitment, the slight sweetness of the honey getting a small approving growl out of it. I ate mine slower and turned the paw on its skewer to keep the underside from charring. The last of the sunlight slid off the horizon and night dropped over the clearing. In a single beat, the fire crackled. The air cooled fast and I checked the paw against the greatsword to confirm the inside had cooked through. I handed it over, and the badger, indifferent to heat, snapped it up and went to work on it with the kind of joy that only carnivores who had just been handed a treat can muster. I tossed a few more branches into the fire and opened the chat channel, because someone in the daylight feed had mentioned that night was the prime trading window. Most survivors went to ground after dark since you could not see your own hand in front of your face out here, which meant the chat feed became one continuous bazaar from sundown to dawn. Sure enough, the moment I opened the channel, a flood of trade lines crawled across my vision. Someone was buying wood and stone at 10 each to upgrade their base. Someone else complained about half-cutting a giant tree only to discover they had not yet produced a single unit of wood, which a third voice confirmed required a complete fell at the base, not partial chops. Someone said this was the giant beast world, and the trees were enormous to us but might be average to a giant beast. I quietly disagreed in my own head, because a Jufu tree ran several hundred meters tall while most adult giant beasts I had seen capped under 200 meters, so the trees were still tall by anyone's measure here, just structurally fragile. A new line caught my eye, a survivor asking after healing items for an injured base beast and offering a high price. The replies came in fast. One voice offered band-aids that probably would not stick on base beast's skin. Another voice noted that as long as the wound was not too severe, a fat protein meal carried the recovery faster than any consumable, since both base beasts and giant beasts healed at absurd rates when properly fed. A third survivor confirmed it. A meter-long gash that had nearly killed their base beast yesterday was mostly closed today, all of it on the back of a heavy feeding. I turned my head and looked at the earth badger, and saw that the chat was right. The smaller cuts along its flank had already closed entirely, and only the trace of dried blood in its fur showed they had been there. The deeper wounds were more than half shut, and the badger looked visibly larger than this morning. I opened its panel, and the strength field read Huang level at peak now, a clean step up, with bloodlines still giant mutated beast and talents now including thick-skinned, absorbed from the chest, plus the existing passive specialization, toxicity adaptation, and disdain. Skills field read flesh skin separation, iron head, heavy strike, and thick skinned, and base still read grass hut. I let out a satisfied breath, because the badger having pushed up to Huang Peak made tomorrow's fight against the twin-feathered serpents look that much more answerable. The badger looked back at me as if to ask what the fuss was about and went back to gnawing on the paw. The chat scrolled while I read. Food requests were down by maybe 4/5 from yesterday, which made sense since most survivors had figured out how to carve giant beast cuts by now. Water requests were up, on the other hand, because water only really came from a river, a lake, or a treasure chest, and most survivors had landed nowhere near a real body of water. A few voices were complaining about the temperature drop already biting in the first hour past sunset, with one survivor offering a wood blueprint of all things in trade for warm gear. I clicked through to look at it. The panel read Wood Blueprint, Category Blueprint, Quality Excellent, Effect learnable at the crafting table allowing wood to be manufactured, the description calling it a basic semi-finished product blueprint with nothing remarkable to add. I read it twice, then closed the panel, because the idea that a basic resource like wood needed a blueprint just to manufacture was funny in a way that the system had not intended. I had no spare warm gear to offer anyway, since my red-bellied flame-crowned cape was the only one I had, and the bear hide was already pulling double duty as a sleeping mat. I sent my own line into the chat asking after blood-red grass, and willing to take it in private message. The handle replies came in within seconds, most of them flirting at the avatar without offering any grass. The ratio of useful answers to useless ones running heavily on the wrong side. One older female voice cussed at me with the kind of venom that read as a permanent personality fault, and the rest of the channel piled on her so fast it was clear she had earned the reputation through earlier rounds. I let the chat handle her for me and stayed out of it. Half an hour of scrolling, and no one had blood-red grass on offer. A district of 100,000 survivors and not a single piece of the grass had landed in friendly hands. Or if it had, the holder was not selling. I was already drafting a backup plan for the morning, when a private message chimed through. The handle read, "I am Mong Mong," and the message read that she had blood-red grass. Lots of it. And she was thrilled to be talking to Soki. The avatar attached was a cute girl with big bright eyes, and the writing voice on the other side ran somewhere between earnest college freshman and a kid who had just spotted her favorite idol.